President of the United States 2024. Dave Smith is with me. Is that a real date? What is that a date? What's 2024? That wouldn't be it, right? 16, 20, 24.
Yeah, that's it.
2024.
You got it. And it's right when I'll be ready.
Dude, you could pull it off. We need a real libertarian candidate that could fucking hang in there. Someone who's going to break the mold, Dave Smith, and a stand-up comedian as well.
I didn't want this task, but now that Joe Rogan's called on me.
You could do it. You're relatively immune to all the trappings that hit all those people. Of course there's dirt on you. You're a part of Skankfest. You know?
That's going to be. There's a lot of grabbing by the pussies in my past.
You're on a podcast called the Legion of Skanks.
Could that be introduced in a presidential debate, and then I have to go, yes, that was my show.
Yes, but you would do it just like that, and everybody would start laughing. We're realizing that this...
What if I just do it like a politician? I'd be like, I repudiated that show years ago. I no longer associate with Big J. Okerson.
Dude, speaking of which, they put Wiener in the pokey today. 21 months in jail for sexting, I believe it was a 15-year-old.
Well, look, I that guy single-handedly probably changed America.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I don't think he really did. He changed it through dick pics. Which, how else were you going to change America in 2017?
They wrote Anthony Weiner gets hard time. Is that the Post? That Post is hilarious. Whoever writes for the Post, goddamn, they have some fucking great headlines. Anthony Weiner gets hard time. Oh, you know what's horrible is before all this happened, he was fantastic. That guy could have been the president.
He had that politician-y thing. I mean, he was like for a young politician on the fast track.
Yeah.
But I really do think Hillary Clinton, I just think it was such a close race that any little thing probably could have made the difference. So you could blame any number of factors. But, the FBI coming out and reopening an investigation on you, like, less than 2 weeks before an election, that's pretty tough to get over politically. Like, in any normal year, any candidate would be buried by that.
After all that, lock her up. There's no way you can survive that. The FBI is looking into it. All the people that don't want to look into it any further than the surface, they immediately go, oh, we fucking got it. It's over.
And I think there's also just, in terms of the politics and the way people work, there was something about Anthony Weiner where, so it made the American public think about him again. Yeah. And Trump was bringing the women who are accusing Bill Clinton of rape to the debates. And I think the average person just kind of went like, wait a minute, so your husband is a sexual predator and your best friend, her husband is also a sexual predator? Like, who the fuck are these people? Like, you just after a while, I was like, who the fuck are you? Who is that the story for?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that got me about Fox News. Because Fox News has always been the voice of conservative America on television, right? The staunch voice of conservative America. But yet, all this sex stuff comes out, like the Bill O'Reilly tapes where he was calling up his whoever the girl was and saying crazy shit with a loofah sponge. Remember all that?
Yeah, I read about it.
It was crazy, but they had recordings of it. And then it was, all the women that accused him of sexual harassment and the sexual harassment with other people. And then other people are sending dick pics and like, whoa, you guys are freaks.
And you know what was really crazy about it was that, so Roger Ailes, who's the head of the network, he went down first for sexual harassment. And then as soon as he was down, like a whole bunch of other people started going down. And then you really start wondering like, oh, shit. Like, was it just like, new guy isn't letting us sexually harass anymore. What's going on? What's going on with this jerk off?
Well, I think it was just there was a culture that they could get away with before the internet, where they were the bosses and the women were the underlings, and they all felt, I'm sure there's probably a lot of dynamics playing there, right? There's a power situation. The man, the guy who's the boss is in position. And then there's also women that are attracted to power figures. And then there's also this conservative, like really repressed environment, which always leads to freak shit. It always does.
Yeah.
When you have like people buttoned down, they always lead to freak shit. They have to find a way out. That pressure's got to go.
Yeah, you're right. I always say to people, if you're in New York City, if you go to a bar in the financial district, like right after work, it's a really crazy scene. Something interesting, like the exact dynamic you're talking about, where it's these people who are all day working in this crazy like that, and then like the ties are loosened, and it's this like
the girls are drinking and they take their shoes off at the bar.
Yep.
And you're like, whoa!
People are getting slapped on the ass. Like crazy shit is going on that you wouldn't think your banker, you know, the guy who runs your retirement account.
You know why? Because like we were talking about before, with like before the podcast started, with like these ancient reward systems. There's an ancient reward system for plundering. I really believe that. I think these guys feel like they're goddamn pirates, like they're plundering.
Yeah,
you know,
that makes sense.
They're part of the financial market, and then they're doing shots. We're gonna fucking take them down. We're gonna fucking take them down. And they grab each other. We're gonna fucking take them down. We're gonna fucking take them down.
And if you think about, the acquisition of property, of goods or anything like that throughout human history, I mean, the idea of like a theory of just acquisition of property is like pretty relatively new. And the way everything was acquired for all of human history was through conquest, just through, you know, you take other people's shit.
And you got to think that like a hostile takeover must feel incredibly like sacking a city. Like, look at these guys. Oh, that's from Wall Street. From, what's his name? What wasn't Wall Street? What the fuck was this called?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, that was a great scene. But people that scene resonated with people. I'm not fucking going! I'm not fucking going! And everybody's like, yes!
It's like being above the system, kind of.
It is, but this is tapping in just same way football taps in. It's tapping into this ancient reward system for plundering.
Yeah.
When men get together and they fuck up other men and take all their shit, and then we kick ass.
It's unbelievable how much I thought about this a lot this last year through the election. But it's like, unbelievable how much like that football team dynamic is just the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like it's like human beings love to get into a stadium, be like red team, blue team, identify with one team, and lose their freaking minds. Like literally lose their minds. And that's when they know it's meaningless. When they know it's just about a ball crossing a line. And this has absolutely no, we'll still bring God into it. We'll bring team into it. We'll bring all these, and again, you see like with this Trump thing now that he just stepped on. Me and Jamie were joking around before we started like, where it's like he like threatened nuclear war and insulted Steph Curry in one thought. And everyone in America is like, excuse me, what was that second part? Excuse, what? What did you say? It's like, and both sides, like this is just what gets them interested.
Well, we are a gossip country now, like 100% officially. Like what we like is a squabble between the leader of the free world, who's a reality star, and some of the best basketball players that have ever lived. Like, oh shit, it's on! Football players. I mean, LeBron James is making videos about the president being a douchebag. He's making videos about all these different people like expressing their right to free speech.
I saw one of the tweets that he tweeted out at the president where it was like just kind of like a broken English tweet, like he used the word ain't a lot in it. And it was just like, and it's just him versus Trump. And I just had a moment where I was like, so this is where the national conversation is at now. Like, do you remember, I just remember watching like William F. Buckley versus Gore Vidal debates, and you're like, how fucking retarded has our country gotten?
Have you seen the documentary?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Really interesting.
If you haven't seen it, folks, it's on Netflix. What is it called? Something... I don't remember. Bitter Rivals? No. Did I make that up?
No. That something is called Bitter Rivals. That might have been a UFC event.
Back in the early 2000s, they named them all.
Tim Sylvia 3. It was something.
Event.
Best of Enemies?
Best of Enemies, thank you.
When did they stop that stupid pattern?
I don't know,
UFC
man.
54, obliteration.
Yeah, I was saying they're going to run out of adjectives.
And they realized eventually, we are. This is a real sport now.
So
Let's stop. Like you don't ever see. It's never like Knicks versus Sixers. Slam fest.
Total slam fest. Yeah, like you never have a name. It's just the World Series. It's just the fucking Super Bowl. There's never a domination event. Yeah, they figured it out somewhere along the line. But what we're talking about, how crazy it is to see that this is all going on while Puerto Rico has no power and only 5% of it has cell phone service.
Holy shit.
You want to talk about, there's a weird racist thing that we're like, if that was an island filled with white people, do you really truly think it was an island filled with white people that spoke perfect English and that sounded just like us? Do you think we would have so little coverage of Puerto Rico the way we do now? Puerto Rico is technically a part of the United States. It's not a state, but it's technically like we had on
and Peter Schiff.
Yes, we just had him
Peter
on.
Schiff, who was fantastic when he was on. He just moved his whole team down there.
Wow, boy, I bet he's regretting that shit now.
For a guy who's known for predicting the future, he really missed that one.
That's like that moment in that animated GIF where that black kid, this guy's with glasses, and he says something funny, and everyone around's going ah! And it's like that's what you just did to Peter Schiff. For a guy who's known to predict the future.
Well, he did.
Did you not see the destruction of your empire by God himself?
Turns out he can only predict subprime mortgage crises and not acts of God.
Fuck, dude, and there's another one along the way. Look at this one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is a repeat one over and over again. This is great. That kid's face is so fucking classic. Like, if he shut you down and gave you that face, you'd be like, fuck! He got me.
There's no counter argument after this has happened to you. You just accept that you lost.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to like gain some ground afterwards with a couple of good insults, but you know, the fucking contest is over.
If that's like happens halfway through a roast battle, just like call it for the judges.
You got to know when to walk away too with a loss, because it's way worse if you stay there and keep swinging. Yeah, you just keep getting fucked up. When that guy gives you that face, you got to go. Okay. All right, you got a good point.
I'll come back and fight another day.
The kid puts his hands on his ears and walks by with his mouth up like he can't believe it. And then, I mean, that might be like one of the perfect events in human history. Forget about like planting the flag at Iwo Jima. This dude making that face that will be used. Who knows how many countless hundreds of thousands of times. How many times has that thing been used? Maybe millions, right? If a YouTube video could get millions of hits, that's probably in the millions of times used.
Oh yeah,
for sure, right? But yeah, it's a weird fucking time with all this because we're concentrating so much on weird stuff, like whether or not you should stand for the flag or kneel. And first of all, I think what they're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, they're protesting cops shooting innocent people. That's what it's about. So it's kind of ineffective on their part, the message, because you have to listen to them afterwards. Because it seems like you don't like America, right? That's what people have a problem with. And Trump's playing on that they get down on one knee. And, I mean, it's kind of weird because it's kind of respectful as also. Like getting down on one knee for the flag is actually more respectful than putting your hand over your heart, which is really weird, right? So they're supposed to be protesting cops who have shot innocent, unarmed people, which have been a fuckload of them. But that's a weird way to do it because you're doing it during the anthem. The anthem isn't those cops. The anthem is all of us. So it's a shitty way to divide because it's not really making a whole lot of sense because the people who wrote the Star Spangled Banner, who are singing it right now, the people who have sung it all throughout the years and stood there, they aren't the ones that shot those unarmed people. What you have is a cop who's probably a nervous wreck, most likely has been operating with PTSD for the past 5-6 fucking years. You have friends that are cops?
A few, yeah.
They tell you crazy shit, right?
Oh, yeah.
I know a bunch of cops, especially from jiu-jitsu. I know a ton of cops and from the UFC as well. They tell you some fucking horror stories, things that they have to deal with. Like they stumble upon a crime scene and guy's got half his fucking head missing, people chopped up, all sorts of dark shit.
Yeah, sure.
And it's in their head all the time. They've had buddies get shot in the face at routine traffic stops. Everybody's freaked out because over the course of 20 years, you're a police officer, you have seen a fucking amazing amount of shit. Yeah. They're probably unfit for the job, these guys that are shooting people. And when you think about the vast number of people that are cops that aren't doing this, all the interactions, we're concentrating on these terrible things that obviously there's no defense for, right? There's no defending someone shooting a 13-year-old boy with a plastic gun. There's no defending any of the crazy stuff that we saw. The guy who shot the guy and then planted the taser. There's no defending any of this, right? But how many interactions are cops having with people where this doesn't happen? A fuckload, man.
Right. Like, let's keep some perspective.
Yeah,
because and if you live in a country with 320 million people and you see one incident or a few incidents, like there's no perspective there.
No
you can find any example to paint whatever narrative you want to if you're just going off random examples. And,
you can.
God, I really it's really frustrating for me because the whole Trump thing and the whole moment we're in now, it's all about a culture war. Like that's what it's really about. It's not about politics or policy or anything. It's really a culture war. And what you have here, and this is why everyone gets so into the kneeling for the national anthem thing, because it's symbolic of two cultures. And to me, it's like I see the worst in both, which is really frustrating. So it's like the left-wing thing is just this bash America with no perspective, like no fucking perspective at all. So it's like, yeah, right. So they'll be protesting, say, like cops being shot or something like that, which you can say, certainly there are legitimate cases of that. And I'm a person who believes we have like a real police problem in America. And we have like just insane amounts of arrests for nonviolent crimes and really fucked up shit.
I agree.
Mass incarceration, all these fucked up things. That being said, like there's also justifiable shootings that cops do.
There's
also,
that too.
But so you have these people taking a knee, but it's kind of like symbolic to people who aren't on the left of this culture of like everything over on the left is just like anti-America, anti-capitalist, anti-white man, anti-man in general, and anti-Western civilization with no perspective.
Right.
Like no perspective of like, just like America's a white supremacist country. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like compared to what? You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It's like, but it's like when they say like we live in a rape culture. It's like, what does that mean? If I'm like, we live in a robbery culture. Like there are robberies, but compared to what? So if you're going to say we're a white supremacist culture, to me it's kind of like saying, America's a poor country. I mean, I suppose compared to some richer country in the future that's figured some shit out that we haven't, compared to everything else that's ever existed, we're a rich country. So if you're talking white supremacists, it's like, well, no, by and large, we're probably the best, like melting pot, most diverse, most inclusive, most like we feel more guilty for the sins of our past than pretty much any other country I could think of. And I don't know any country that like, it's like America was founded by conquest of the Native Americans. It's like, right. And so was every single other country. And every country had slavery and every country had all these things. It's not, no one 150 years ago wasn't fucked up.
There's
that doesn't
no
exist.
utopia.
Right. And so if you have some perspective, the left-wing thing gets pretty frustrating after a while. However, then on the Trump side, so I've kind of been more sympathetic to the right than the left probably over the last year and a half, because I really do see like the issue of our time becoming this like, are you for free speech or against free speech? That to me is like really...
Right, because we don't really figure things out unless we get to debate them.
Yes.
We can't have forbidden topics, and we can't have topics that are supercharged to the point where you can't have a position on them, and you can't explore them.
They're
too powerful.
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, it's one reason. I think there's many reasons, but that's one of the most important, like why we need free speech.
Yeah.
Because unless you come from the position of I have everything 100% correct, like then maybe you need to have a conversation and someone has a conversation back with you, because odds are you don't have everything 100% correct.
It's their correct versus your correct. Like their correct is gender equality, their correct is transgender rights, their correct is socialism, their correct is like, and if obviously I'm talking about people far left, not talking about you if you're listening. I'm talking about the hypothetical extreme far left person that is protesting Ben Shapiro on Berkeley campus, calling him a Nazi.
But this isn't just right. It's not. You're talking about a hypothetical person, but obviously this is happening in reality. There's lots of them, and there's enough to the point where like it's like this real thing where okay, so the great threat to free speech in our time isn't coming from the state, which by the way, like as a libertarian, that would be more comfortable to my narrative. Like that's what I've been thinking for years is the great threat to free speech. But no, it's coming from this left-wing culture that says, like Ben Shapiro can't speak, Milo Yiannopoulos can't speak, Condoleezza Rice can't speak. Like all look, if Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson need to be silenced, I mean, my only problem with those two is that they're too moderate. Like these are not bigots. These are intellectuals making an intellectual argument, and they can't even speak.
Yeah.
So it's very scary. And then the other thing I would just say on this left-wing culture, and this is what Kaepernick kind of like embodies to me, is just it's this frustrating ignorance, like this clown. So you'll be protesting police brutality and mass incarceration, and then like you'll put a Castro image on your jacket. Like, I mean, come on, man.
Understand.
Come on, dude.
You
can't stand up for something and swing and miss that big.
Yeah.
Like that's so like you got to research a little bit. I mean, do 5 minutes. All the information's on your phone. Like I just don't. So there's that, and I get being against that. And I want to be like on the free speech side. And I see a lot of these guys like who I'll bring up, like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro, guys you've had on your show, who I really admire a lot because they're fighting against that, and Jordan Peterson fighting against that authoritarian PC anti-free speech stuff. So I kind of am more sympathetic to the right. But then there's this thing with the NFL and it really just reminds me of all the cultural aspects of the right that I hate, which is when First of all, I'm sorry, as someone who's standing for freedom of speech, I'm pretty fucking troubled by the President of the United States, the man who's in control of the most powerful army and the military in the history of humanity, coming out and saying, I think if someone takes a knee, they should be fired. Now, that may not be writing a law against speech, but that's pretty fucking chilling to have like the government telling you, hey, you know what would please me? Is if you started firing people when they spoke out against me. I don't like that. And this fucking right wing, like, praise the flag, and if you say anything against it, you're not, it's like religious. Like, it's blasphemy.
It is
to criticize
religious.
the troops or criticize the country. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, it is a power issue. What I was going to say earlier is that when you were talking about the state, when you were talking about the fear of the state and the censorship coming from the state, it's the same thing, because the state is just power, and the far left is power too, and it's power with shame and with blogs and with protests, and it is the power that they're trying to exercise to get you to behave the way they want you to, and the right does the same thing. I think what we should have, if we're gonna really keep doing this whole we're a country thing, we should have like an armistice when, and this is, I think, with reasonable people have an issue with this idea of desecrating the flag, because the flag is just a flag and it's not important. But what is important is that we treat each other like we're a team, and we look out for each other, and we're all together, and we're all united together. We shouldn't be if we have an issue, our issue should be with communist dictatorships across the world that have nuclear weapons, that are holding their people captive.
Right.
Like if there was ever a time to look at a country and go, wow, this is a country that is in an unjust position, and it's a really terrifying dilemma that you have this murderous dictator who's in control of nuclear weapons, and he has an entire country of people enslaved, which is essentially what's going on in North Korea, right?
It's basically like a giant hostage situation.
That's a real giant issue to us. It's not whether or not transgender people can use the fucking the men's room or the women's room. That's not our issue. That's a cultural conversation, and that cultural conversation should be calm, and we should be friendly to each other, because we're supposed to be on the fucking same team.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But that stuff with the transgender bathrooms, I gotta say, man, and it's really weird for me. Sometimes I just can't. I can't even believe I hold some of the positions I do, because I grew up like a kind of left-wing kid, and I was like raised by a single mom in New York. That's kind of where I belong culturally. But I really can't. It's almost like the kooky conservatives, the religious kooky conservatives, who I just dismissed for years, is like, this is just insane, had more of like, they had a grain of truth that I didn't realize. Like, they'd be like, you can't legalize gay marriage or they'll start coming after the kids. And you're like, well, that's just insane. Anybody should. And like, gay marriage gets legalized, and like the next year they're like, kids should be able to take hormones to suppress that. And you're like, whoa, this is kind of weird. It's very weird to me that the left didn't take like a minute to celebrate this victory on gay marriage that they had been fighting for like my entire life. They got a huge victory. The Supreme Court came in and forced it on the remaining 20 states or so who weren't going to vote for it. They forced it on them, and there wasn't a big backlash. Like, that one chick went to jail for like 3 days. It's not like the
one in Oklahoma wouldn't marry gay folks.
Yeah, Wendy Davis, I think.
Something like that.
And then she and then it's not like, there was like this wave of Republicans who rose up like, we're going to repeal, or we're going to write a law to reverse that Supreme Court decision. It's like, no, actually, they elected the first pro-gay marriage president. It's like, you won on this issue, and immediately, as soon as they won, they're like, now transgender bathrooms, now this, now like.
Well, I don't think they're related. And this is why. I think, first of all, the gay marriage thing is consenting adults. They should be able to do whatever they want to do. The difference between gay people and transgender people is pretty radical.
No, I agree.
Almost the same difference as between straight people and gay people.
Yes, but they're in the same four letters, according to the left.
Yeah, but that whole LGBTQA, A+, whatever the fuck it is now, there's a bunch of new ones that they've added on, asexual.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's actually insulting that they lump them together as if it's like the same thing. I mean, I think it's weird that when Trump tweeted the thing about trans people not being able to serve in the military, I saw a bunch of people being like, Trump, has come out against LGBT rights. And you're like, what the hell does this have to do with LG or B?
Yeah.
Like, why is that?
It's crazy. They're just a gang. Lump it all together, a big progressive gang of acronyms. But what I was going to say about all this stuff being lumped in together is that the left has been the side that has looked towards the hard science when it comes to global warming, right? The hard science when it comes to climate data. Those are the ones that are always pushing, whether they're right or wrong or getting the right data. They're the ones that are really harping on the science. And if you looked in terms of the amount of people that are working in universities, there are far more left than there are right. Far more left professors than there are right. So you would think, okay, you have this like base of academia and knowledge on the left. But yet the left is the side that's willing to entertain the idea that a young kid should take hormones to alter their sex, when you know for a fucking fact that when you're a young person, you're extremely confused, constantly, back and forth, left and right. There are hormonal changes. The cerebral cortex, the frontal cortex, doesn't even really fully develop. They don't say you're a real fully developed person until you're like 25 if you're a man. Which explains a lot of the shit that I did, right? It's a lot of people listening that are 20 and retarded. They're like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Exactly, dude. You're barely an adult.
Oh, you think about things you do at like 22 and you're like, I can't believe I'm the same human.
I can't believe I'm the same human. But so this same party, this same progressive mindset that is so incredibly open-minded, but yet also so deeply embedded in academia, like far more than the right is. This is the side that is willing to put aside all that they know about biology and psychology and physiology and children. Put aside that. A lot of people are, not all of them. I don't want to lump anybody together. Put aside that for progressive brownie points, for saying that you are so incredibly open, like this child obviously knows that he is a she or she is a he, and we need to start addressing them as that, and this is just a fact. Well, it's not just a fact. It's a conversation that we should have, and I think it varies in individuals, and I think there are some people that I have personally talked to that are transgender people that for sure are happier being a woman or a man, and they were born in what they feel is the wrong body, and I absolutely 100% salute their right to go out and do that. But we should have a real conversation as to how many people is that really happening to? How many of these people have a psychological issue? How many people, is there a physical trait that we're missing? Is there some switch that gets flipped when they're young? I mean, it's a fascinating aspect of human beings that you are one sex and wish you were another.
Right, and it seems strange to me that on the left, the rules always seem to be, there's this topic, like it's like the left's thing forever. It's always like, we need to have a national conversation about race.
Right.
But if you say the wrong thing, I want you ruined.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same thing with like the transgender thing. It's like they want to like, it's like we want to have a conversation about this. They put this forward as like, this is an issue we need to talk about. And then also, by the way, you're not allowed to say anything. So if you bring up the 40% suicide rate and say maybe this isn't due to societal oppression because there's no real link between societal oppression and high suicide rates, now you need to be fired or something.
But
you know?
They say 40% of transgender people commit suicide. And the people that want to support the idea that it's not any sort of a mental illness in any people, and sure, it's not in some. We're not generalizing, but it must be in some, right? The people that want to deny that say the reason why they are suicidal is because they don't get a chance to express their genuine, authentic self, which is a very good point. So it's not that either or is right.
No, I'm open to the argument.
I am too. I'm open to the argument that the 40% is possibly, it's maybe a combination of those two factors. Maybe there's some people that are mentally ill that are suicidal in the first place, and they hope that maybe becoming a woman would make them feel better, and it didn't work out. There's a whole website where people I think it's called Transgender Regret or something like that, and it's all people that switched over and were like really upset that they did it, and then realized it was like some strange phase they were going through or whatever. And then, you know, there's people that are, I'm sure, suicidal because they want to be one way, and people just constantly shit on them and bully them and heckle them, and that's what's causing them to be so deeply. It's not like one or the other.
No, and I think in every individual case, there's probably like a complex, a complex set of, different causing factors. So I agree with that. I just think it's like, no matter how, look, obviously I'm for, like everyone owns their own body and should be able to do whatever they want to it. If you can find a doctor who's willing to perform a surgery on you, have whatever surgery you want to have. And I think transgender people should have the freedom to do that. Truthfully speaking, though, I don't really see anyone, not that anyone isn't saying that, but I don't really see anyone disagreeing with that. Most people seem to agree.
But there are people that think it's a sickness and they absolutely shouldn't be allowed to. But what is a sickness?
But it seems like that's pretty rare. Like even the people who are getting a lot of heat for like their stance on transgender issues, like I've never heard Gavin McInnes say it should be illegal. I've never heard like Ben Shapiro say it should be illegal. What they will say is that I'm not going to pretend
that you're a woman.
I'm going to acknowledge that you have a Y chromosome, and like that to me is like, okay, that has nothing to do with your freedom to have a surgery. This guy has a freedom of thought. to describe what's going on. And it is kind of crazy. Like you said with the global warming thing, like, it's like, yeah, the left prides themselves on being the science party. Like, we believe in science. Although the problem is that, and like, I try very hard to like wrap my head around all of these different, you know, like issues. And I've read a decent amount on climate change, and it's pretty tough stuff. It's not easy. It's not like some of these other issues that are much easier to understand. And I will say that about 90% of the people on the left who are like, have the science, they haven't looked into it. They've just been told this is the science. And they're like, oh, great, now I get to bash people by having the science. Because if you're going to say, like, you're the side that believes in science, I'm sorry. To deny that there are biological effects on gender is...
But that's such
as
a
anti-science as you can be.
Such a small fringe group that do make that distinction. They think that there's no biological difference in the sexes, and those people are really just crazy people that have pushed it so far. They're so far left that they're in some crazy alternative reality.
There are a lot of those. I look at it like the same way. You know, like Scientologists have like their levels. I look at like left-wing ideology.
Like OTC or something.
Yeah,
like that?
It's like the social justice warrior who's like out in the front lines, like protesting Christina Hoff Sommers.
Right.
Like, she's like top level left wing mindset. But there's a lot. But no, the idea that gender is a social construct is pretty well accepted, I think, on the left. And to me, that is insane.
I don't think that's true. I think it's only accepted in a very fringe group, especially academics.
Maybe you're right.
And people in school that protest about it, and people that are super active social justice warriors. I think if you polled people whether or not they think there's a biological difference, and you gave them three choices, yes, no, and duh, that most people would say duh. Like,
okay.
Duh.
Here's the only thing I'll disagree. I think you're 100% right if they were taking that test anonymously. I think if they had to put their names behind it, I think you'd get a much different answer.
I think you're really right.
I talk to college professors, like my sister's a college professor, I talk to our friends, I talk to other people. A lot of them will come up to me, and it's almost like this thing like at a dinner table, it's like get close and be like, hey, just so you know, I really agree with you on like a lot of stuff. And I'm not, you know, like it'll be like the people who, for the one Jordan Peterson, who, by the way, a guy like Jordan Peterson really does beg the question, why aren't there more Jordan Petersons?
Yeah.
Like, why is it just you and 5 other people? Why are there not more professors? And the reason is because they're all intimidated. Look at all the shit he's had to deal with.
Yeah.
They're all intimidated by that.
Well, Brett Weinstein, who's a super progressive guy, I mean, he's way left, and he got shamed, and he got, like, literally threatened. I mean, and now he just won a lawsuit, though. He just got paid. He won $500,000. We had him on, like, right after Evergreen College had a shutdown, and kids were patrolling the fucking parking lot with baseball bats looking for him. Like, it was like really crazy stuff.
Yeah, man, it's insane.
Really crazy stuff that the left, I mean, imagine if that was coming from the right. You would start calling them Nazis. You start calling them white supremacists. You start calling them thugs. But on the left, they conveniently ignore the same types of behavior patterns. Oh, my
God. It's so unbelievable. Like, the double standard
like
of,
Antifa.
like, dude, well, look, so you have, like, the thing that happened in Charlottesville, right? Where you have, like, I mean, a few hundred people marched, and I guess there were dozens of them at least, who were like wearing Nazi gear, which is, you know, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's pretty, like, eye-opening and like, holy shit. I mean, what it's like disturbing and kind of very interesting to me that anyone in 2017 in America is putting a swastika on.
Not only that, these dumb fucks got together in public, lit their face with torches so everybody could take video and photos of them, and march through the street together, yelling like blood and soil and all sorts of weird fucking shit. Like, what were the quotes that they... Do you remember what the quotes were?
The Jews will not replace us was one.
Yeah, what
Which,
the
can I tell
fuck
you,
is that?
As a Jewish person, I've never felt more empowered in my life than the Jews will not replace us. What an unbelievable... Like, I've never even entertained the idea of replacing anybody. And then when they were like, the Jews will not replace... I was like, I think we can replace these motherfuckers. Like, I think...
They're scared.
They're worried about it. Let's make a move, Jews. Let's go replace these Charlottesville.
How many people were there that protested?
A few hundred. I think between 300 and 400.
That's it?
Like that. That's it. That's
it. Looked like a good-sized crowd.
And
like,
now,
I'd be psyched if they came to see me perform.
Yeah, right. Right. If I walked into that on the road, I'd be like, all right,
that's a good
not a
crowd.
bad.
That was the line to get into the theater. You're like, oh, we're doing good tonight.
And they'd be like, it's pretty white supremacy in here.
It's candly in here.
They're really, I mean, at first I thought it was well lit.
Can they bring their tiki torches inside or no? If they stick them in the dirt outside, is somebody going to watch those fires. And how are you going to know which torch is yours?
We got a guy, we have numbers, we got it all figured out.
You get a cheap-ass Walmart torch when you had a nice Home Depot torch. You put a good, solidly constructed American Home Depot choice, and some dude stole your shit and left you with some made in Chinese bullshit.
That would be
WTO bullshit.
And it's probably just good enough that you get halfway through the march before you're like, wait a minute. This
You look up and you see made in China. You're like, fuck.
I knew this felt light.
You used to have a little American flag underneath your little metal bonnet.
Well, let's get real. They were all made in China.
Yeah, probably. There's not a big market for tiki torches.
But anyway, I was saying, but these guys, like, I mean, even like people who are real far right on the right wing, who are like pretty, considered, like whoever, like Ben Shapiro, who's being protested by these guys, he doesn't associate with any of those guys. No. He's disgusted by them. Gavin McInnes won't associate with any of these guys. He's disgusted by them. These guys can't even speak at their own rallies. They don't come to... The right wing does, I think, a fairly decent job at just being like, no, we're not even associated.
But don't you think that Trump did not denounce them correctly?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, look, from what I saw, I actually thought it was a weird reaction to what Trump said. So what I'm saying is I see this going on here with this one thing that happened in Charlottesville, right? And I haven't seen too much Nazi stuff outside of that.
Right.
On the internet, but I mean, like in terms of marches,
but what everywhere. About his response?
So, but this is just let me make this point because I want to address what you're saying. But so then this happened. This one thing with a few hundred people in Charlottesville happened. The media goes fucking nuts. Like this is the biggest thing that's ever happened. On the other side, on the left wing side. Everywhere that someone tries to have a free speech rally, everywhere anyone who's one step to the right of Bernie Sanders wants to speak, like Condoleezza Rice can't speak, like anyone who's one step to the right of Bernie Sanders gets shut down, and there is this mob, called Antifa, who actively go after assaulting people and this isn't just Nazis, they go after Trump supporters or anyone who disagrees with them. They wear hammer and sickle flags, which is, representing an ideology that killed more people than the Nazis. Yeah. So, let's put them both on the level of like genocidal, horrible groups. However, this one group on the left is going everywhere across the country and are given comfort and aid by college professors. So it's like
mayors.
Yes, they're actually, and when it's brought up, and it's actually backed up by things like 40% of millennials in a Chicago University study. Say don't believe in free speech for hate speech, which basically means you don't believe in free speech. You've got about 40% of millennials who don't believe in free speech.
Yeah, because then you have to define hate speech, and that's where things get slippery. And what you might call hate speech is so different from me.
Right.
What you might call hate speech is me saying that I don't want to call a transgender woman a her.
Right. That has been labeled hate speech. That's a microaggression. These are all. So it's like once you define that, it's like, oh, you can punch a Nazi, but by the way, everyone who disagrees with me is a Nazi.
Yeah.
So I'm against hate speech, and by the way, anything I don't like, I'm offended by is hate speech. And that's, but the whole idea of freedom of speech is to protect unpopular speech.
Yeah.
It's not there so we can talk about things that don't offend you. Obviously, no one has a problem with that. But so you have this on the left, it's this mass problem, and then the media demands that everyone on the right denounce this non-existent thing. So when Trump came out...
But it's not a non-existent thing. What was disturbing was seeing hundreds of people walking down the street with torches, yelling out racist things.
Absolutely.
Where they got together as a group, and the only thing that was differentiating their idea was so much more stupid than the free speech idea, because their idea was just to differentiate people based on how much melanin is in their skin and what part of the planet their ancestors came from. That's one of the dumbest fucking ideas in human history. So what you have is this river of dum-dums walking down the street. And the president doesn't say that. The president doesn't say, he's the guy that's running the country, right? He doesn't say, hey, this is the lowest form of stupidity that we know of with humans. The lowest form of stupidity is to accept everyone that looks like you. This is so fucking stupid. You're pretending that someone has any power whatsoever over where they were born, their national origin, who their parents were. You don't. You don't have any fucking power over that. So you're putting all the power in things you have zero control with. That means you're a fucking loser, all right? And that means the only thing that you got to bank on is this white skin that you didn't even work for.
Yeah.
This is the group that you're lumping everybody together with, and you don't know. Do you not know any great black people? Do you not know any great Hispanic or Latino people? You don't know any? Well, then you need to get the fuck out of your neighborhood.
I
You're just
agree
talking
with you.
out of ignorance.
But I think that applies to that thing you're saying about kind of being like a loser and then grasping to some collective because you don't have anything in your own, story to really cling to or your own life. I agree with you, but I think that applies to people who get into this identity bullshit on all sides.
I agree with you as well.
I don't disagree. It's like,
we're talking about the president.
Sure. But I just think, to me, what he said, from what I see, was like he did call out those guys. He did say it was like disgusting, but what people were upset about is that he said there were bad people on both sides.
Well, did you ever see Stormfront's reaction to Trump's speech? That he never criticized white supremacy, and they were saying that it was very good, very positive overall. And he said that there was problems on both sides and bad people on both sides.
Well, I did see videos
implied that Antifa was bad also, and they were saying, God bless Donald Trump.
Okay, so this is what I saw from videos that I saw, because I have learned, and we could go through this forever, that I don't trust the mainstream media at all. They're completely full of shit.
Sure,
and,
so whoever wrote
permeated
that
by corrupt people.
A reporter.
Sure, no, I'm not saying that person is necessarily corrupt. But
They
I'm
could
just
have
saying,
been an embedded reporter that just wanted to write a story.
Maybe. But from the videos that I saw, like videos of what was going on there, it's like, I saw all the stuff you're talking about, like the tiki torches, the Jews will not replace us, swastikas, all that really, garbage.
Right.
And then I also saw like David Duke and Richard Spencer and all these guys who are kind of like, Richard Spencer, I think, is a white nationalist. David Duke has been around forever, is a bigoted guy who had a almost successful run for governor, I think, at one point in Louisiana, but, has been around forever. Now, I find a lot of both of their ideas fucked up and offensive. But they got a permit and were there to speak. And this was the next day. This has nothing to do, the night before they were out doing all that crazy shit that we were talking about. And then I did see this video of groups of people who were forced out when they canceled the speech, forced out through an Antifa mob, and a bunch of them getting tear gassed and rocks thrown at them and shit like that. So I don't know. As disgusting as like white supremacy may be, or National Socialism, particularly to me, someone whose family was fucking slaughtered by them, I believe in freedom of speech. And I think I do think to some degree, I just get where, I get where Trump is being, I guess what I'm just sympathetic to is that he's being raked over the coals for calling out both sides instead of just calling out one side.
Right.
Whereas everyone on the left is silent about this Antifa group. It just started getting press, actually covered in a fair way in the mainstream media. But it's everywhere.
Well, I think the idea of Antifa, though, is to react to people they disagree with who are speaking, right? This is their idea. Versus the idea of white supremacists to walk down the street and denounce other weaker races and get together as this big group with torches. And then people protest them and then there's violence. I think you got to address the root of the idea of it as a representative of all the people of the United States. The root of the idea of it is that it's okay to be a white racist. And, there's a lot of people that say, what about brown pride? How come Cain Velasquez has brown pride tattooed on his fucking chest? If you don't know the difference between a guy who is born of immigrants that literally his dad walked from Mexico, he's first generation. Or second generation, I guess. His dad was first generation. How's it work? No, he's first generation American because his dad was from Mexico. It's a different, they came here to try to get a better life because they got a shit roll of the dice. They were born in Mexico. And he wanted out, and he wanted better for his family. So they took a chance to come here. When he has brown pride tattooed on his face, he's not saying that, they're going to dominate and the Jews will not replace us. He's saying, I'm proud to be a Mexican. When you say you're proud to be a Mexican, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, it doesn't mean you hate white people. It doesn't mean you hate black people. It means you have pride in your heritage. When you have white pride, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but our thought is that you hate other races. If you're a white nationalist, you love white people look at you like you're a piece of shit and you're a racist and you think black people are inferior and you think Mexican people and Asian people and American Indians, you think they're all inferior. That's how we look at it. But if you have black pride, we look at you as a strong person who's resisting this really fucked up society that has brought your ancient ancestors over from Africa and enslaved your people and literally marginalized everyone who looks like you, and you were there to fight against that.
Yeah, but it's kind of strange in a way. Even as you say it, it's kind of strange that we think of one this way and the other that way. I do think, I get that. I certainly get the point that, Cain Velasquez tattooing brown pride on his skin, given
Very
his
different.
story, is a very different thing
Yeah.
than tattooing white pride on your skin because
Right.
you're like a neo-Nazi or something like
Well,
that.
Cain was the UFC heavyweight champion, and it never came up. I mean,
Yeah.
he's arguably the greatest UFC heavyweight in history. if
Oh, it
not-
only
if not
came up
number one.
in the fact that like they were like, oh, we're gonna sell numbers in Mexico
Yeah.
City,
Brown pride.
and they did, and he lost the belt there.
Well, he shouldn't have used brown. It's a fucking English word. People are like, "What the fuck, bro?" I say, you know, you can't even. What's the word brown in Spanish? What's the word pride in Spanish? I guarantee you, it ain't brown pride. If you go over there and you go, "I got brown pride," they go, "What? What'd you say?"
So it weirdly symbolizes how American he is.
Orgullo marron. That's how you say it. That's
Sounded-
what it should say. That's what it should say, Kane. The fuck, Kane.
I can't wait to see that guy fighting.
I hope he can heal up. I hope
Yeah,
he gets
he's
better.
had a lot of
Some
injuries,
back
right?
injuries, yeah.
And just his whole career, he's had a lot of injuries. But he's been,
Yeah.
like you said, maybe the best heavyweight ever. So, but I just wanted to say to what you were saying, like I get that. I get the difference. And I think that's a very, very valid point. But like there is this thing, like the idea of white people embracing identity politics,
Right.
the way the left has kind of embraced identity politics, it does in some sick way seem like the natural logical progression if you want to accept what the left wing believes. And then you're like, okay, well, you look at the demographics, white people are becoming a minority in this country in the future, and this is how you kind of have like I get the point you're making, but at the same time it's a bit of a weird setup that the left has, where like everyone else is allowed to say these things except white people. Like political correctness kind of only applies to this one group,
Right.
and we're going to put everything you say under a fine-tooth comb, but somebody else could say like whatever they want. It gets to a cartoonish point where you have Ice Cube lecturing Bill Maher about making a joke, and actually, unironically, while he's promoting his gangster rap album, sitting there going, now what made you think it was cool to say that, Bill Maher? And it's like, motherfucker, you made Cop Killer.
Yeah.
He
no, that
calls-
was Ice-T.
Oh no, what was his song?
Ice-T was Cop
now
Killer.
Now I'm racist.
Fuck the Police
He made
was
Fuck the Police.
NWA.
Sorry. They both didn't like cops, is my point. But I'm just saying, like, he makes, you know, what's really funny is he calls Eazy-E a house nigga on that album.
Right.
He uses the same insult
Yeah.
actually toward another black guy. Not as
Yeah.
a joke, not as a self-deprecating joke the way Bill Maher used it, but
Right.
in the worst way you could insult another black guy. He uses it. So I just think there is this weird dynamic on the left where it's like their rhetoric is so anti-white and so anti-male that I almost sit there and I go like, man, if you guys think Charlottesville is ugly, you're gonna create a lot more of this. I was sitting at my sister's place a couple weeks ago and talking with a few of her left-wing professors. And my sister's got like she's a college professor. She's got this big like bookshelf up behind the like behind the table, like lots of books. And I just looked over and there was a Michael Moore book from the '90s called "Stupid White Men." And you just look at it and you're like, oh yeah, maybe that's why they're all angry. Like,
Yeah.
people don't like being the bad guy.
Can you
Their whole
imagine if
life.
a black guy wrote a book called Stupid Black Men? They would come at him so hard.
Yeah,
That sounds like something Larry Elder might write, but with a more eloquent title.
yeah, right. No, but if a black
Here's
guy
what's
even
wrong with some stupid black man.
Yeah, if a black guy wrote a book that was like, all white people aren't stupid, they'd be like, Uncle Tom. Like right away, it's
right.
like, oh, you sell out. It's
Yeah. Well, it's racist.
yeah.
We just don't like to think it's racist because it's about white people, and generally white people don't have to deal with racism nearly as much as other races, so we allow it to be okay. It's also sexist. There's a big thing that's going on now, especially lately, where women think it's okay to say all white cis men are trash. I mean, it's so fucking common. It is such a crazy generalization to say that all men or all white men are terrible and they're horrible trash until they prove otherwise.
And it's so fucking
But they feel like it's
contradictory.
okay to say that.
But it so contradicts everything they've supposedly believed in.
Right.
So like, if there's like a Muslim terrorist event, and then somebody lumps that into like radical, or lumps that into all Muslims, people on the left will lose their mind. Like, how can you lump the whole group in with what this one bad guy did? And then they turn around and lecture white people about like
Yeah.
the evils of history.
But forget, if we just stop saying left and right, don't you think
Sure.
that what this is just human beings doing that team thing? And once you start adopting the rules and the patterns of the team, whether you're a Wisconsin cheesehead or you're a Boston Red Sox fan or whatever the fuck it is that you're into, you get in this, like, you've ever heard those Vikings chant where they they get the whole stadium, like 1,000 people, and they clap their hands together.
It's insane.
It's amazing. It's amazing, right? But obviously that is a group think sort of a situation, and they all gear together, and they all support this behavior that makes them feel good that they're a part of this group. And I think people do that whenever they support right-wing causes, and I think people do that whenever they support left-wing causes. And what the right and the left are is essentially just frameworks that we can fit in our ideologies and our mind and our needs and all of our social and emotional requirements, and we can fit them into these patterns that we follow. And when anybody opposes the structure that we've adopted as reality, then we fight with bike locks and fucking pepper spraying girls with Trump hats on, and you find all sorts of insane justifications for racism, sexism, all sorts of crazy shit that you would if it would happen to anyone else other than the person that you're opposing, you would think of it as being a horrible affront to everything that you stand for. But as long as it's a white man, who cares? Hit him in the head with a bike lock. You know, imagine if it was a black woman that this professor was disagreeing with, and he stepped up and he hit her in the head with a bike lock. It's insane. Like, that's when you see someone who does that from Antifa, it is exactly the same as that redneck who pulls out his gun and shoots at that black guy who's holding a torch.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is all the same thing.
Well, I mean, you're right, and it's like there are shocking similarities. Yeah. Between the extreme left and the extreme right, or whatever, these teams, and I agree with you completely. Yeah. I think it's all this tribal team groupthink bullshit kind of that we have to a large degree outgrown, but that still like kind of haunts us and is still with us.
I don't think they've outgrown it in universities, and that's part of the issue. That's why this is all happening at UC Berkeley. That's why you're seeing it all throughout the country in these universities. Because in universities, first of all, you have a bunch of people. Let's like try to be as honest and objective as possible. First of all, you have a bunch of people that are seeking knowledge. You have young people that are idealistic, that want to change the world, that want to stand out as being better. They want to virtue signal. They want to do all the crazy things that they can to be something great. Mm-hmm. And there's other ones that want to get laid, and there's other ones that want to manipulate, and they still don't know who they are. They still don't know how to behave. Then you have these professors, and a lot of these professors went through this process, and then after they went through this process, they got their PhD. They wrote, and then they started teaching. And so they have never been outside the hollowed halls of academia since the time they were like 19. Yeah. They've been going through the whole system. And some of them do it, and they do it with balance, and they figure out who they are, and they take great pride in the fact that they can mold these young minds and give them information. And some of them are incredibly broken people who were never sexually viable when they were young, and now they're in a position of power, and they virtue signal to a sickening degree. And you see them standing up for women above all else, which is what happened with this whole Betsy DeVos thing when they're trying to push this. Is that how you say her name? DeVos?
I think you said it right first. DeVos,
they're trying to push due process in the case of these sexual assault cases on campus. And people are resisting due process. People are resisting guilty until proven innocent.
Oh my God.
That's what they want.
And I'm sorry, and I don't mean to also keep harping on this kind of left versus right thing, but it's hard for me. I almost want some term to define. But this left side of on college campuses, this group, their position is simultaneously. I mean, it's really quite amazing. Their position is that, and this is what basically what was just repealed now, but this is what the guidelines under Obama basically did on college campuses. They said, okay, there's no due process for men who are accused of rape. Oh, and by the way, and this isn't in the legislation, this is just the cultural punch, but so there's no due process for men accused of rape, and by the way, everything is rape.
Everything is rape.
Everything's rape.
Every
guy you've ever met is a serial rapist.
Assault. Yeah, I mean, if you had anything to drink, by the way, the man is not responsible, or the man is responsible, the woman is not.
So you've
so
probably
they both had
taken
3 beers.
I mean, you've probably taken 90% at least of the pool of what men and women in America previously considered good guys. Yes. Forget even rapists. Good men. Just good, the guys who you think are good people. Not considerate. 90% of them are probably serial rapists.
Have you heard of the story from University of Amherst? It's one of the most ridiculous ones, where this guy's suing now, and he has gone through hell for the last couple of years. But it was a kid who was a student from Nigeria and some girl who was in his class, and they hooked up, and they got together, and they apparently they were slightly intoxicated, I think on marijuana. the girl gave the guy a blowjob, and then she wanted to stop, and he was trying to get her to do it again, and she said no, and so they ended it. That was it. She talked to her friends. They decided that she had been sexually assaulted because he was trying to get her, come on, please. I don't know what he said. I don't know. Maybe he was
but that would be enough in this.
That would be enough. I don't know what the fuck he said. I don't know what the scenario was. But I do know that it was essentially an awkward sexual exchange between young people, which is just a part of being a young person who's having sex. When you're a person and you're 18 years old or whatever they were, and you're in college and you're having sex and you're in some sort of a sexual scenario with a new person, what are the? How long have you been doing that? 3 years? How good are you at it? You're probably fucking terrible at it. You're probably awkward as shit. You're probably weird around women. You can't believe they like you. You don't know why they like you. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you think you have to act a certain way. Finding yourself.
Yeah, and
like
you said before, you actually do not have a fully developed brain.
Yeah.
And it's a different. And forget even in sex and stuff like that. There's just things. How many things did you do at 20 where you'd look back and go, oh, what a douchey thing that was to do. Like that's not how you treat someone. So
this young guy, I think he was 19 at the time, somewhere in the college age, whatever it was. He's fucked. They kicked him out of school. They labeled him some sort of a sexual predator. And he's in this terrible position where, he's suing the school, but it's going to take a long time before anything gets resolved. And, we don't know the whole story of the case. But if the case is as he's representing it, and as no one said he held her down, no one said he tried to rape her, no one said he threatened violence, no one said anything like that. Her version of the story is that they had some sort of a willing sexual encounter, and she just didn't want to go any further, and he asked her to, and she said no, and then it ended. That's it. That's just part of being a young person. That's just part of being a young person having sex, especially if you're intoxicated. Is it a good idea to have sex intoxicated? I don't know. I mean, I've done it a bunch. I'm sure you have too. Most people have. Yeah, stop pretending you haven't done it. Stop pretending that a lot. Look, it's all sorts of mistakes you make when you're drunk. Why are they so much bigger if it's sex?
Yes, and there's something about just using the word rape. I mean, it's like, look, rape is a particularly horrific, cutting word because of what a horrific crime it is. And then to try to make everything else like, it's literally, I mean, the extent they go, it's almost like, it's like if you punch someone in the arm and they go, you committed arm murder or something like that. It's like, no, you can't you can't just throw that word at everything.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants to
It's worse than that because at least that's an assault. At least it's an actual egregious offense. If you're talking about people having sex while they're drunk,
no crime.
There's no crime.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So calling, it would be like calling a glance murder.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fucking crazy.
No, it's the idea of microaggressions. And this is the whole thing that underpins the philosophy, which I find really terrifying, is that the idea of microaggression or social justice. It's like you take these terms like aggression or justice that meant something.
Yes.
And now you've made them mean the opposite of what they mean.
Yeah.
A microaggression is not an aggression. Inherently, it's not an aggression.
No, it's a normal part of human communication. You say something to me and I go like this and I walk away. That's what people do. Okay,
right.
That's a microaggression.
And there's this thing, and this is why I find it to be such like the issue of our time. I almost forget, it's not the issue I necessarily wanted to be the issue of our time. I was hoping it would be like embracing libertarianism full on or something, but it just seems to be like, are you for free speech or against free speech? And free speech is such a prereq for everything. It's a prerequisite for everything about the society we live in. And everything, particularly like what you do, what I do, everything we do. Like you can't, what I love in life is like comedy and truth. And you can't have either of those without free speech. It's impossible.
You can't have this conversation without free speech. I mean, we couldn't have this conversation if we were on a state-sponsored program. We couldn't have this if we were on a corporate-sponsored program. We likely couldn't have this conversation without being interrupted or being lectured to or having some conversation with someone who says, hey, you can't say the word nigger.
Right.
You're not allowed to say it. Forget
like
about what
even
Bill
in the
Maher
context,
did it.
Yeah, you can't.
Don't say that noise with your mouth.
Right.
Not calling someone it, not saying you are one,
And like no one can go, but that's fucking retarded.
It's words.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But that's, this is the rule and this is how everybody operates. And there's a thing where it's not, if we're living in a world of I can't commit a microaggression, I can't go down a path that might offend anybody, you need that freedom in order to find anything interesting. There's nothing worth saying if you're living in this world where you're like, oh, I can't get outside of this box.
Right.
So I find that to be very just... it's like very dangerous. And I feel like people in America, it's almost like we've had it too good for too long, that people are removed from the fact that we can lose all this shit. It's like there's no respect for like what we have, how much higher a standard of living we live than the vast, than most humans that are alive today, and the vast majority of humans who have ever existed. Right. I mean, it's like, I get this from a Jordan Peterson lecture, but he said it was in 1895, the average American lived on $1 a day, adjusted for modern inflation. So in 1895, it's like Central Asia level poverty in America. And that's just everyone before that. Living in back-breaking poverty was like just life. That was just all of life. And it's like we figured something out in these last less than 200 years. We figured something, or a little more than 200 years. We figured something out. Wait, what am I saying? No. Less than 200 years. We figured something out in this Industrial Revolution that now lets us live up here on this. And it's like we can lose that.
And a lot of it had to do with freedom.
But the whole thing to me is freedom. The whole thing is that we embrace. Look, if you look in the year, you had on your show Thaddeus Russell, who's great. I just did his podcast recently, and he put it this way, where he goes, in the year 1800, because I was talking about what an incredible thing the 19th century was and how it transformed humanity. And he goes, in the year 1800, Americans are all making their own clothes. In the year 1900, Americans are shopping at Macy's. Yeah, if you had said in the year 1845 and been like, dude, in the next 65 years, slavery is going to be abolished in the West, and we're going to have an industrial revolution. It's like magic happened, and that's why we live the way we live today. And no one is even interested in that story. Right. Like, why do we have this much wealth? Right. And I like what you said. I think it's all about freedom.
And when you have a guy like Bernie Sanders who harps on and on about income inequality, I have a real issue with that, because it's one of those blanket statements that sounds really good at a campaign speech, but freedom itself breeds income inequality.
Yes.
Because freedom means you can do whatever you want. You could do very little, or you could work like a maniac. Well, if you're going to work like if here's the game, okay? You do something, for that something, you get currency, you use that currency to buy things, or to make sure you don't have to work again, buy food and goods and take trips and travel. The more you work, the more you decide that you want to pursue something, the more chances you have to acquire that currency if you do it correctly. That is income inequality due to freedom. I mean, take away all the other factors that might be, in play, whether it's racial discrimination or sexual discrimination. I'm not denying that those things exist. But what I am saying is that the idea that you are going to have income equality in a capitalist society where anybody can do whatever they want, people, that is so counter to what we know about human behavior.
I agree.
You're talking about a fantasy person who doesn't exist, who has motivations outside of wealth, outside of, most people want some sort of reward for what they do. And if everybody gets the same amount, there's no fucking reward for working extra hard.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
not going to. Well, you're not going to get Microsoft. You're not going to get IBM.
And
you're
it's
not
not
going to get
just.
Apple.
I mean, it's not just. I mean, they talk about fairness a lot, which is a strange concept. But it's not just that somebody works twice as hard and doesn't get more. I mean, that's not the right thing to do. Anyway, but like what you were saying, and I just think it's like they use the term so much. But what's misleading about it? You're absolutely right that freedom breeds inequality. But what's misleading about it is by that people think like the poor get poorer. No. And that is objectively false, demonstrably false. It's not they make it out like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, like that old saying, but it's like that, if you think it through, like that can't really continue like that.
Well, you're always going to have
no, but the poor get
you're always
richer.
going to have rich, but if the poor work hard and figure they have a possibility to escape whatever economic situation they're in, it is possible with freedom.
And homeless people here live better than rich people in third world countries, or certainly at least better than average people in third world countries. So it's like, it's not just that the inequality grows, it's like everything moves up and the inequality grows up here. This is like what I can't understand. And again, it's like what I was saying before, like if you have any concept of the fact that we're by far the richest, freest human beings who have ever existed in recorded human history, at least recorded human history, who knows what was going on in ancient Egypt, but like, or before ancient Egypt, but but if you realize that we have this incredible amount, then it's like, it's like just being like, oh, we need all of these policies to like give handouts to poor people. It's like, well, actually, let's continue this train of getting richer and richer and richer, which is not at all, like what people like Bernie Sanders, man, it's like,
well, it's a hustle. Bernie's got a hustle going on.
Yeah,
and
he's
you
full
find out
of
it's
shit.
a hustle. You find out it's a hustle when you find out he's got a bunch of houses.
Yep.
And his wife tried to buy up all this fucking land to expand a university that she was running, and she killed the whole fucking school. Like, you got greedy.
How about the fact that the motherfucker, and we haven't seen, so first off, he made $1 million off a book on how it's wrong to be a millionaire. I mean, it's like, how are you not, how can anyone look at you like as a serious leader when you did that?
Second he's saying what people want to hear, and there is some truth to some of the things that he's saying. I think that the world would be a better place if we had more social programs in place. I think the world would be a better place if colleges were free. If we,
I don't disagree with like the thought behind that. I think all of these things would be better suited in voluntary arrangements than some forced government monopoly. But I do agree with you that, like, sure, I'd like great schools to be very affordable or free if possible. I'd like everyone to be and Bernie Sanders certainly addressed some very real problems. Like, he would point things out that were very real. Like, he would be like, they claim it's a great recovery, but 90% of the new wealth has gone to the top 3%. Like, he'd have some points.
Like Jackie Mason.
I only do one New York Jew, and that has to apply to every New York Jew who's out there. But like, I do, so like, there is some, and I don't care if Bernie Sanders makes $1 million, but there's something like, number one, making $1 million while claiming it's kind of a moral issue that some people have so much while others have so little. Endorsing Hillary Clinton. I mean, I just don't know how you can look at the guy who goes, the problem is income inequality and the banking cartel, but I'm going to vote for the candidate of the big banks. Like, to me, that's insane. It would be if Ron Paul endorsed McCain.
Well, don't you think the big banks sort of were on both teams?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they were on Trump's team, but they've certainly been on every other team besides that.
But they are now.
Yeah.
Most certainly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
I think... God,
it's not even like the teams. They run the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. Like, they run the whole system.
But the fact that Bernie Sanders never had like a fiery speech about what happened at the DNC, about how they literally conspired to ruin him and to take him out of the race with Hillary, because the DNC wanted Hillary to be the candidate. They literally sabotaged him.
Oh, they were very open. I mean, I shouldn't say they were very open about that. Openly, they lied and said, we don't have a pick. But the leaks that were weaponized.
Weaponized
were,
leaks.
I mean, really, some of
Russia did it. Russia ruined everything.
I actually remember it was one of the most surreal, and I'm a guy who's always preaching about how full of shit the media is, but even I've, like this last year, that'll give the Trump moment credit, even I've been like, holy shit, I can't believe it. But I was watching CNN, and they were playing clips from a Hillary Clinton interview and talking about it, and Hillary Clinton was claiming that Vladimir Putin weaponized information against Hillary Clinton. And they're discussing this, and they never mention that the information, this is on CNN, they're breaking down this piece, and they never mention that the information that was weaponized was that CNN leaked debate questions to Hillary Clinton before the debate like, they sit here talking about undermining democracy for a month. What could be more what could do more to undermine democracy than the debates, the things that people actually watch and vote on in America? They gave Hillary Clinton the questions that were asked at the debate. We know for a fact 2. I'm sure there were more, but we know 2 questions were given to her and that they were both asked. And Hillary Clinton takes them. Doesn't have a problem, doesn't have a moral issue with that, just takes them and pretends she's hearing the questions for the first time. And the show that I'm watching talk about this on CNN, that's talking about the weaponized information and not mentioning what the information was, the show is called Reliable Sources. It's a show where they break down the media. It's like, it's surreal to be watching. And then those same guys in CNN go, we've got an epidemic of fake news on the internet. And you're like, man, I don't know if I'm living through a fucking simulation or what, but this is some nutty shit.
Well, it's also so obvious when you watch the strategies play out. Like, for people who don't remember, Hillary Clinton, before she ran against Trump, was running against Barack Obama.
Yes.
And when she was running against Barack Obama, one of the things she did was she positioned herself as to be right of center. So more right than Obama was. So one of the things that she did was she was publicly stating that gay marriage was wrong. She was publicly stated that she believes that marriage is a sacred institution between a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. And that was her way of positioning herself to the right of Obama. Like, she would appeal to all the religious nuts.
Well, Obama, by the way,
I'm okay with going left because I don't want no more war in Iraq. But these fags marrying each other and butt fucking is just it's me and Gary been married for 25 years. You think it's right that they get to be the same thing we are under Christ?
Well, that's
Fuck
right.
all
And
that.
well, just to be fair, that Obama was also against gay marriage in that election, but she absolutely, you're right.
What did he say? How did he say it?
He did the same thing. It was these motherfuckers until it's like 51% approval rating.
Right.
Then all of a sudden they come to
I think
Jesus.
they need 53.
Yeah. It's like right when it starts being a wedge issue we can use.
Yeah.
Right when Obama's going, oh, we need re-election, and I didn't end any of these wars, and Gitmo's still open.
It's like if you were a comic, but the only way you could work is if somebody gave you an earpiece and they fed you great lines. Like you couldn't just ad-lib yourself. Like if you were doing this podcast, and while you're doing this podcast, Big J's over in the corner feeding you lines through one of your earpieces, right? And there's a team of guys, There's a few other guys in the background.
They're doing like they're like running like research on it.
Yeah,
like they're
like Jamie's over there constantly Googling.
Focus grouping like this shit.
And you have like a screen in front of you. Like, Howard Stern used to have that with Jackie the Joke Man. This is way back in the day.
Really? You'd see the jokes?
Yeah, what he did was he had a thing where you would write on like an overhead projector. It was like a thing. It was like a camera, and he would see the video of it on his side. He would see the picture. So you had a funny line. You would write down the funny line, and you would put it on the projector, and Howard would get it on his screen. And that's one of the things that Jackie the Joke Man did, because he was great at like one-liners and things along those lines. He knew a lot of jokes, and so he would give Howard like really funny things to say, and he would juice it up. And I did the Jackie chair for a couple times when Jackie the Joke Man quit. Jackie wanted like $1 million a year, and they wouldn't give him $1 million a year. They would give him like $900,000. He was like, "Fuck you!" So he left. And so when he left, they had a bunch of guys sit in that chair, and one of them was Artie, and Artie wound up taking that job.
Right.
And part of Artie's job was to feed Howard lines. And like that kid Benji, he's really funny, man. That guy would write down stuff and feed Howard funny lines. So he has a few guys on the side that would toss him stuff, which is essentially what a politician does, right? A politician, like, you're not going to get their full unadulterated ideas except for Trump. And that's one of the things that was so refreshing about Trump, even though it was a shitty message. Even though there's a poverty of words and the way he spoke, and there was this clunkiness to it all.
Well, there certainly is a clunkiness. There's no question about that. It's a very, very simplistic way of speaking compared to what we're used to from politicians. Yeah, all slogans.
Slogans work. I
think there is something about it, the fact that he was, as you were saying, like completely unrestrained, completely there's something really interesting about Trump. I mean, the whole thing's really fascinating, but it's like the most profoundly hilarious and interesting moment ever, and like no one wants to appreciate it because they're so dug into like one or the other.
Scared of nuclear war with Korea too.
Yeah, well, I get that. That's kind of scary. I mean, it's more scary for like the people in Seoul than us, but still, that is scary. But the thing with Trump is that he speaks in, it's like, okay, the people who hate Trump hate him more than anyone. I mean, I've never seen a political leader hated as much as the people who hate Trump hate him right now.
No one in America, for sure.
No one in my lifetime in America has even come close. I'm sure there are other countries where it's like, some dictator falls or like that. I'm sure, but like but Trump is hated, and I got to be honest. If you ask people on the left why they hate him, I think they struggle to give you a really good, honest answer for it. I mean, they'll say things like,
so?
I think they say things like racism or like bigotry, or, I'd say...
The EPA, people were paying attention to what he's doing.
Sure. Right, they were worried about that. Although, I gotta say, the EPA thing, I don't think any of this is actually the source of the Trump hatred. I think this is like, we hate Trump, and now... what's he doing that's terrible? So we're going to get evidence against him. The truth is, what they'll say 9 out of 10 times if I present this to a left-wing person, or I'll go like, he's pretty much continuing all the Obama policies, or it's virtually the same, which I think is one of the really big stories of the Trump era so far. That how much is the same since Obama? No one wants to talk about this.
What are the big changes?
I don't think there are big change. I'm not saying there are no changes.
Immigration policy.
In immigration policy, he wrote one executive order that then got suspended by the courts. But it hasn't really gone into effect.
But it's the idea that he's promoting.
His rhetoric is very, very different. No question about that. He promotes different ideas. His rhetoric is very, very different. But in terms of like monetary policy, fiscal policy, foreign policy, the war on drugs,
but not
any of this
foreign
stuff,
policy if you're talking about immigration. I mean, that's kind of like...
Okay, I'm putting that in domestic policy in my mind, but yeah, sure enough. Well, in foreign policy, speaking about, because I was saying 9 out of 10 times the answer to me is they go, well, that's kind of your white privilege. And if you were in one of these groups that's worried about being deported, you would feel differently. But the fact is that deportations are down under Trump. There were more under Obama. I mean, they're down. Now, there's a few different arguments for why that reason is. There have been a lot of arrests, but not deportations. But it's just like, even that, the narrative isn't fitting the way, like what really drove what made people hate Trump was his rhetoric. It was all rhetoric. It wasn't, Obama was deporting lots of people. Obama was bombing the crap out of them. Obama was targeting families and he was torturing. Like, all these things were happening, but he didn't talk about it. He spoke about it in a nice way. And Trump was like this unapologetic, like, white, rich man who didn't play the PC game and spoke of minorities not in like a glowing, I'm so sorry, like minorities are better than me, I'm the evil white guy. It was like, no, we're great. I never say we're great. He would say, you know, some nice things about minorities when asked, but his central message was like, our team's great. And this, to me, is, I think, the reason why left-wing people's blood boil with Trump.
There's just so many pieces of evidence that point to corruption with Russia. So many pieces of evidence that point to the idea that this guy is operating in the interest of himself and of big business, and then he's profiting in a huge way off being the president. And one of the ways they're doing that, they're not rolling back the Environmental Protection Agency standards because they don't believe in them. They're rolling it back because it's impeding business. That's infuriating a lot of people on the left.
Sure.
That scares the shit out of people when you have some crazy old man who's just doing everything for profit. Some guy who wants to literally, start diss fights with basketball players. And that host from, that was the thing, we talked about this before, but the host from ESPN who had tweeted all some stuff about him being a white supremacist, and then he asked for ESPN to apologize. I'm like, hey, how come he didn't talk about her, man? He can't talk about her. He can't. He literally can't say her name. Because if he goes after a black woman, then it reinforces all these people's ideas of prejudice.
Right. No, look, I get what you're saying. And just to the point about corruption, I mean, like, of course, I mean, that's the nature of government. Like, whatever decision they're making is based on what lobbyists is lobbying them the harder, and what it's all corrupt. But my point is just that is not at all different with Trump. I mean, like, if you, like, the corruption under Obama was, I mean, Obama just went and collected $400,000 for a speech to Wall Street. So he's in there a couple months ago, right?
But don't they all do that once they get out?
Yes, but Obama's like you're in there, you preside over the bailouts of the banks, started under Bush but continued under Obama, and the big ones, the Fed policy, which really bailed them out. Like, you're in there, you take all this money for your campaigns, you vote every way that they want you to, you preside over the biggest profits for the big bankers, you put them all around your administration, and you get out and you collect your check. It's like time to get rich now.
And that's only one check. He's going to get a ton of them.
And
do
you think
it's speaking everywhere?
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm being too cynical. Probably all of those bankers just really love the way Obama speaks. You know, I mean, he is a great speaker, but my guess is that that's not why they're paying him.
Hillary Clinton is not a great speaker, and they paid her shit tons of money. And that was one of the things that Bernie said: release the transcripts.
And you know,
release the transcripts.
And of course, she didn't, but WikiLeaks did get their hands on one of them, in which she said something that kind of indicated why she didn't release the transcripts, because she actually said, I'm lying to the public. I mean, not literally, but she basically said to all these bankers to not be concerned about, because, you know, her public rhetoric at the time was like, you know, no one's too big to fail, no banker too big to jail. And then she basically said to them in this speech that WikiLeaks leaked the transcript of, where she was like, you know, you have to take one public position and then hold a different position in private. Oof. So she was basically assuring all of them.
How do we know that that's unaltered?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the same way that we know that all of the emails are legit. Like, they've been presented. Even the Clintons aren't arguing that they're illegitimate. Like, nobody's really coming out and arguing that they're not legitimate, and it seems to be from a legitimate site.
Do you think that Julian Assange is sort of shifting over time and being more and more aggressive? Like, his position on things, he's more aggressive and more leaning one way. Like, I think he's bummed out that he's still stuck over there. I mean, it's got to be rotting him away.
Sure, but I think he's been kind of consistent. It's almost like everybody else is like changing their tune. Like, I feel like the Democrats, to me, and the people who follow them, and the Trump haters, it's like insane how much they've changed their positions. Like, to me, Julian Assange was exposing all this bullshit under Bush. Right. He exposes all the shit about Clinton and Obama. And it was like, yeah, from my perspective, they're all part of like the same network. So he's kind of exposing the same network. Whereas like the Democrats became Cold Warriors. Like the Democrats, as soon as Trump got in, it's like, well, everything the CIA is taken without any evidence being presented, and Russia is the evil threat of our time. And like, when did you guys became Republicans from the 70s? Like just that quickly? And then I even saw somebody today, like it's like the Trump haters, like again, feel however you feel about Trump. Hate him, sure. Like go ahead and be against. Like I said, I think it's terrible that he's saying people should be fired for speaking up. Like that's ridiculous. But I say these guys who are like, they're like, oh, you want to talk about patriotism and like bashing Trump for being a draft dodger?
He wasn't like, just once. He dodged it a fuck ton of times.
Dude, if you
How many times did he dodge it?
Dude, whatever you did to stay out of the Vietnam War, God bless you. God bless you for staying away from that fucking nightmare that was started on a lie. That was like the most disgusting mass slaughter for profit. Sure. I mean, like, if someone avoided that, like you're mad at him for avoiding going and killing some fucking poor people in Southeast Asia.
Well, it's just a point that they could grab him on the hypocrisy of being a chicken hawk. And
fine, like
same as Dick Cheney, they did it with him as well.
But it's not because he's look, I'm all for hitting someone for hypocrisy. Like if you're advocating a war, hitting them on not wanting to fight a war, but you're just mad at him for like not being on the same side of yours about police brutality. It's like,
well, they're pointing out his character. They're pointing out who he is.
Fine, but don't abandon all of your principles. He's a
privileged guy. He's not like JFK who went over and fought in the war.
I get what you're saying, but I don't think I'm just saying if the left is going to say, to me, it's kind of abandoning your own principles if you're going to bash someone for like not fighting in the Vietnam War.
You kind of know what they're doing. They all do that. They try to find something that you did that's kind of questionable that they can politicize.
Yes,
and that's what they did.
I get it. I'm just making the same thing with like the Democrats becoming the Cold Warriors. Yeah. It's just like, so whatever wins, whatever gets you points.
What really gets me with the Democrats, with the left, is how all of a sudden Julian Assange is a puppet of Russia now. Like for the longest time, WikiLeaks was supposed to be the voice of honesty. This non bipartisan open-minded group that's just trying to disseminate information they think is critical to the American people that they're being denied. Like the casual, what it called, casualties. What was that one video that they had? There was one of the first videos was, I forget what they called it, but they had a footage from one of those gunships, one of those helicopters. They showed these guys sort of casually talking about gunning down these reporters. They thought these reporters were carrying guns, and so they just opened fire on them and gunned them down, including a bunch of,
yeah, I remember the video, right?
I forget what it was called. I forget, but that sort of like they felt like they had some information that people weren't aware of. They weren't allowed to see photos of caskets. They weren't allowed to get the full. They weren't allowed to have a really informed opinion on what exactly is happening there. And when they see the horrors of war in that regard, like we see people like sort of casually talking about gunning down some people, and I think there were kids in their car. Well, they shouldn't have brought kids. Like that was like one of the things they had said. Like that whole thing was like, whoa, we are better off knowing that this is what can happen if you just allow people to just go to war, and especially some really ambiguous war on terror. That's what WikiLeaks stood for, right? Yeah. WikiLeaks stood for Chelsea Manning, aka Bradley Manning, releasing this information. Someone who is, under a lot of people's eyes, a patriot, right? A whistleblower, sees something, gets a hold of some stuff, and is like, look, you guys got to see this, and gives it out to WikiLeaks, but try to give it out to other people, right? Didn't he try or she try to give it out to the New York Times? And
I believe so.
And they rejected it. And then Snowden did the same thing.
And then Chelsea Manning, Bradley Manning at the time, paid quite a price for it. I think 200 days in solitary confinement.
With no clothes on.
This is a really brutal price.
Yeah.
And exposed a ton of really interesting stuff. I mean, what we learned from the Bradley Manning dump was, like all this crazy shit about war crimes, and then like we learned about how there were like U.S. officials trying to influence the British Parliament, trying to influence reporters, and just all this shady shit that came out. And then again, it becomes this kind of like integrity test for the mainstream media, where they just have no interest in it. I mean, if they talk about it, they'll talk about Chelsea Manning, but that's the story. The same way Snowden's the story. Right. None of it's ever like, oh shit, we learned some crazy shit that's going on.
Well, that's what we are. We're a nation of gossip. Kaepernick's the story, not Puerto Rico. A guy not standing up with his hand in the correct position that lets us know that we are all on one mindset.
Right.
That guy is more important.
And even within that context, and a lot of people like, and this is where there's this weird disconnect between like, there's like the mainstream media and then all of the alternative internet media.
Right.
And there certainly is a ton of bullshit in the alternative internet media world and a lot of just straight out false stories.
Sure.
But then there are people also talking about the truth there, whereas none of that seems to enter the mainstream media. So what gets brought up online and in the alternative media, which should be at the center of this story, is that like the players didn't used to be on the field for the national anthem. For like the vast majority, I think it was 2009 or 2010, the Defense Department cuts these huge checks to the NFL, and then all of a sudden they get the players out on the field so we can do this whole tribute thing. And the military-industrial complex has been like working on taking this like pastime, the #1 sport in America, which is already pretty like warring, and making sure we can use this as propaganda to get Americans, into this nationalistic pro-military
Yeah, I didn't
mindset.
know that.
And like, no, are you a journalist? Like, how are you not interested in that?
Right.
How can Obama sign into the National Defense Authorization Act that he has the right to detain American citizens with no charges? And it's like, okay, like Alex Jones is over here, and like, yeah, I know he says some wild stuff, but he's making a big deal about this. Like, this is crazy. And then the mainstream media just doesn't think it's a big story. How is it possible that you're a journalist, an honest journalist with integrity, and you don't think it's a big story? You don't look at that and go, well, that's the story of my lifetime. Obama just repealed habeas corpus.
Don't you think it's the exact same thing as what we were talking about with people in academia and on the left that don't look at things that are in opposition to the groupthink of their ideology?
I think it's a lot of that, and it's like this thing where it's like there's this, it's almost like unspoken, unwritten pressure where you just kind of know. It's like, right, you have this herd mentality, and if I step out here, I get bashed.
Right.
And most people don't want to get bashed.
Right.
Like, you were talking about the people who are professors, and there's certainly very, very smart people, lots of very, very smart people, but it is a certain personality type. It's like that person who, like, that you go to school your whole life, then you go to college, then you go to grad school, then you teach, and you've basically just been in college your whole life.
Did you see that video of that woman at the Berkeley protest where she's screaming
at the cops?
I'm a fucking professor.
Yes, screaming at the cops.
Yeah, see if you can find her, because that is a social retard.
That's what, and she's asking them to go arrest people inside.
Arrest people. They're Nazis.
And these are the type of people who never got into like, look, college.
They're socially retarded.
Yes.
I mean, that's really literally what it is. They never competed in the real world. They didn't formulate a normal psychological outlook.
Yeah, but there's
misfits.
that woman who you're talking about, and
love her.
and oh yeah, she's whatever the Scientology, whatever the top level is. Like, I'm telling you, it's left wing level 5.
Yeah.
Like, you've achieved the height of those people are literally mentally disturbed people.
Yeah.
Like, these are this is a woman with
the video's gone.
I gotta find it.
Impossible.
This one is taken.
Go to
down,
4chan.
So.
They'll find it for
I don't
you.
believe those geniuses at 4chan haven't kept this gem.
They kept
but this
it.
is she's at level 5 with like Trigglypuff and
Melissa
like all
Crick,
those
that
people.
woman who like yelled out for more muscle at Missouri State.
Yes, these are like the maximum level, and most of those people are made up of like genuinely disturbed people.
Yeah, here she goes. Here, give me some volume on this crazy bitch.
You should be standing up to those Nazis! You should be protecting these students and hate! This is hate! These are fucking assholes! And this is a joke! You're protecting the Nazis! It's a fucking joke! You are a joke! You're Proud Boys! You're Proud Boys!
By the way, it's the best.
You're Black Lives! You're a fucking Proud Boy too, you motherfucker!
Do you work for Gavin?
You're not protecting the NYU students here! And I'm disgusted! I'm a professor! How dare you! How dare you, fucking assholes! Protect neo-Nazis! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! These are kids who are trying to learn about humanity! They're trying to learn about human rights and against racism and xenophobia and LGBTQ rights! And
LGBTQ.
you're letting these fucking neo-Nazis near here! You should get there!
Wasn't that at Milo's rally? Which is hilarious because he's gay as fuck.
I think this was Gavin's.
Gavin.
Was it Gavin's?
Yeah.
Because you say Proud Boys is Gavin's
Oh,
thing.
you're Proud Boys. Oh, boy.
She might work for his marketing department.
does now.
Like, that's like the best branding.
She's still going. We shut it off, but she's still going. I'm a fucking professor. How dare you? Someone should make a T-shirt.
From my
It says,
perspective,
I'm
too,
a fucking professor. How dare you?
I'm a professor was not what you expected the next line to
I'm
be.
a fucking professor. How dare you?
So there's, well, you know, also from my perspective, like as a libertarian, you just look at that and you're like, wow, what a naked like example of you're just calling the state, calling the authority of the state because you believe this ridiculous microaggression, like,
well, just look at her, the way she's behaving. And that's not a balance.
But
that's
what
not a healthy person.
What I was describing with the college professor, I wasn't talking about those people. Like, that's level 5 disturbed.
Is that top
people.
of the food chain? She like a coral belt in jiu-jitsu?
Yes, that's like, it's not even like, that. Not even black belt. That's like next level. Like, you tap out. Yeah, you tap out black belts every day.
Coral, and then red belt is like Noam Chomsky.
Red belt, right.
Noam Chomsky's a red belt.
Yeah, but Noam Chomsky is actually like an intellectual. I don't want to lump him in with these maniacs.
He's the top of the right.
But he is top of the food chain. He's the top of the food
chain, left-wing ideologist.
But this is like some Hickson Gracie shit.
Right.
What these people.
Well, she's more retarded. She's like more of a kung fu person.
Yes,
like
right.
She's got ineffective martial arts. She's got some.
You're
fake
a master
shit.
of some shit that doesn't even really work.
Yeah, it
for
doesn't
anyone.
really work. She's trying to get people with that chi touch.
He's like a guy with like just an overhand right could probably take you in a fight.
I feel like you'd like to see her like in an MMA fight with Cyborg. Like she actually would believe that she had this chi
Those
force.
are still the most amazing.
I'm a fucking professor.
There's still to me nothing better. I know you've gone over a bunch on your show before, but there's nothing better to me than someone really believing in a martial art that doesn't work and finding out in a fight that martial art doesn't work. It was amazing through the early UFCs when it used to happen. You'll find internet videos that have it.
The fact that it's still going on in 2016 and 17 has been some of the best videos ever, especially out of China, where they had that one guy had to go into hiding. He brained some fucking poor slob that thought he knew kung fu. You know, some dude really thought he was going to chi touch this guy, and this Chinese kid who knows MMA fucked this guy up and had to go into hiding because so many people are mad at him for using martial arts techniques that didn't originate in China to sort of denigrate Chinese martial arts.
Man.
Yeah.
Myth versus reality. Always interesting.
They are fighting against the exposing of their bullshit, nonsensical fucking tiger claw shit. Like,
and you've got an entire identity associated with this being real.
Meanwhile, the guy who did it is also Chinese. So China is apparently, like Asia in particular, is where a lot of the martial arts techniques that people use today originated. And they were sort of adapted, and they were changed, and they evolved, particularly in Thailand. They really started understanding how to kick the legs, and they became masters at using the elbows and the knees, more so than... And they did it through competition, which is really quite fascinating. They did it through gambling. And by having these competitions on a regular basis where people were like 9, 10 years old, they start fighting. And they fight. They might have hundreds and hundreds of fights in their career by the time they retire. They developed a real acute understanding of what actually works and what doesn't work. Whereas in these other worlds, they didn't do that. They weren't like this small island that's filled with hedonists that are gambling and kicking each other in the legs and betting on the guy kicking the guy. That's really what developed that art. But then there's other ones that sort of stayed in this non-evolved state. And then as the material sort of got out to all of the world and people started evolving the techniques, it all coalesced together in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And then we realized, okay, it's a combination of these things. It doesn't necessarily always work on every individual, and styles sort of determine interactions, and athletes determine whether or not something is effective or ineffective as much as the technique itself. The athleticism and speed and power of the practitioner is very important. But all told, these are the things that we think are pretty effective.
Yeah,
and these are the standard techniques.
Yeah,
so
you keep learning new information, but you figure out pretty quickly, like, okay, like wrestling and, crane kicks are not the same thing.
Right.
Like
this guy used Western boxing techniques and Muay Thai and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and just beat the holy fuck out of this poor, did it in like 10 seconds. Beat the holy fuck out of this poor kung fu guy. And then he had to go into hiding. People didn't want to know. They didn't want to know. This is white power! White power! The white power guy goes in there and gets fucking murked by Anthony Joshua. And they're like, shit, how is this possible?
Right.
Well, of course it happened. Did you not know who you were? Do you not know who he is? You're in denial of this. And so if they all came after Anthony Joshua because he beat the shit out of the white power boxer, that's exactly what's going on in China. Here, you can watch it here. So look at this guy. This poor fucking dude.
You could just already tell.
He's got some crane technique going on, and the kid just fucking starts beating the shit out of him. Boom, 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 boom. Just fucking pummeling him unconscious, knuckles to the temple. Literally, it happens all in like 10, 15 seconds. This kid just kicks the shit out of him. And then after this happens...
And there's a guy who doesn't get hit. Like he's probably never been hit before. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he doesn't get hit at all.
He doesn't
this
box.
Moment.
He's not like used to even like being in this situation.
But he must have believed that it was going to work. He must have believed that he was capable of fending off attacks.
I'd imagine. And he's doing that crazy shit where they're like trying to, it's like, I don't remember in MMA, what was the guy? I can't remember his name. It's like some really, really Asian name, but the dude who fought Nick Diaz. You called the fight. It was like an old Nick Diaz fight before he left the UFC, and the guy tried this crazy technique. He tried like hands out here. I'm gonna like block your punches with punches. He's like a short Asian dude.
Maybe Kakuno. I think you're thinking of Tony Ferguson. I think you're thinking of Kakuno.
It's 100% a Nick Diaz fight, and
might have been
you
Nick
called
Diaz
it.
Kakuno.
You called it, and I remember you saying during the thing, you were like, you say before the fight, you go, this is really weird. He was doing this stuff before, like in the octagon warm-up, and he comes out like doing it, and you're like, okay, he's going to try to fight Nick Diaz with this weird style, like where he's trying to, whatever it's doing, like this kind of like style of trying to block by like hitting their hands with your hands way out.
Pull up Nick Diaz's record. I'm remembering Tony Ferguson fighting this guy who was a bad motherfucker in Pride, and his name was Kakuno, and he used to fight like that. Pull up Tony Ferguson's record. See if you could find that video. Tony Ferguson versus Kakuno.
But that fight I don't.
Versus him.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's Eddie though.
That fight I don't remember. I don't remember Tony Ferguson. He's been around for a while. Huh?
Yeah,
he fought in Pride.
Tony lit him up. So what it was that Kakuno was a guy that had this crazy kick that he would throw to the body and fuck a lot of people up with it. And it was kind of a hybrid between a front kick and a roundhouse kick. Like some people would call it a 45. Yeah. Fair. Katsunori Kakuno. And he KO'd him. Yeah, I think that's the fight you're thinking of, man.
No, I'm telling you, like this.
See, I don't think that guy. Pull up Nick Diaz's record.
Pull up Nick Diaz. It's a different guy, I think.
Yeah, but Kakuno used to fight like this. He used to walk forward like this.
The guy I was like that. It was a similar type of style, but the guy I was talking about was like real short too. And I mean, Nick Diaz just. It was like the worst guy to fight with that style because he's got like real crisp boxing. Right. So he just came in, I mean, just lit him up like.
Nick's lit a lot of guys up.
I think it might have been his last fight in his first run in the UFC. So it's up way before this.
No.
I'm sorry, down from this. Like before is down. So it's before. Yeah, it's his first run in the UFC. So it's maybe before the losses.
Gleason, Josh.
Yeah, right there before Diego Sanchez. That's it.
Oh, that guy, Koji.
Click on it. Koji Oishi?
No, there's no S there. Oh, yeah, Oishi? Is that how you say it? I think you're right. Koji Oishi. Yeah, maybe. Oh, okay.
And Nick Diaz lit this kid up.
I remember saying this kid looks like he's on heroin. Like he walked in like almost like in a zombie state as he walked into the octagon.
It was really strange.
Just click on that right there.
No, that's Nate. This is a different.
Is it Nate?
Yeah, and then this was in the UFC.
But yeah, Nick fought Oishi too?
It's the vine of it is there. I don't know. I guess they both fought.
Yeah,
this is the fight I'm talking about. He's like trying to do this open-handed weird thing, and Nick Diaz is just lighting him up.
Out of him.
That was it. Yeah,
I guess that's all they have online. I mean, I'm sure it's on the UFC.
See if you can find Tony Ferguson versus Kakuno. That's a weird one because Kakuno had this weird style, like almost like you would think of as a guy who knows karate, like move forward, like standing like totally square, not sideways, like moving forward in this weird way. And he would throw this kick, and it wasn't a front kick up the middle. It was like an angled front kick. So he'd hit you with the ball of his foot, but he would throw it like a roundhouse kick, which was one of the ways that they used to do that in the old Taekwondo way too. They would make impact with the ball of the foot with a roundhouse kick. Like they would throw a kick. Like I got a book when I was a kid about Taekwondo techniques, and this one old dude would practice in the park by kicking trees. And the way he would kick trees is with the ball of his foot. He would throw a roundhouse kick and kick the ball of his foot into the tree. And it was a really funny book because in one of the things where he described all various self-defense techniques, he described what to do if you're ever threatened by someone. And one of the things you should do is kick a tree. So show them, like if you kick a tree, what you could do to them. Which probably isn't actually bad advice.
It's just really break your leg and then...
No, just kick a tree.
No, but I'm saying like if you're not used to kicking trees.
See if you can back that up.
Ooh.
See if you back it up, but that's
it. It's only a 10-second video.
Oh, okay. Kakuno was... this is also another one of those guys where... Go let that play out, that little video you were just showing. He was one of those guys that was in a shit ton of fights. See, that was That was back when he was competing in karate. I think that's Kyokushin. And so they fought with Kyokushin outfits on, but they had an MMA fight. And the guy who was the referee was dressed up in a fucking weird sort of geisha outfit. Like, what the fuck's that guy wearing? But Kokuno was like sort of a classic Japanese martial arts striker. That's him right there.
Okay.
And you got to think, by the time these guys got to the UFC, they had been brained so many fucking times, especially fighting in Pride and K1.
Oh yeah.
Shit. Boom. Front kick to the body, right hand. That's a wrap.
Oh, this dude is fucked.
Check this out again, man. Watch how he did this. Just step.
Fight.
Oh, it was a different fight?
Yeah.
Oh.
Is it a tournament?
Probably, which is really crazy that these guys would do this more than one time in a day. But that was what they did in Pride a lot. Oh, he just threw him off the top of the mat. In Pride, they would fight several times a day. In the early UFCs as well.
And then, eventually, I think they started realizing, like, a lot of guys get injured doing this.
The craziest idea is like that stupid movie Warrior, when they fought more than one time in a week. Like, they fought once and they fought again the next day. Like,
that's got to be worse than the same day, probably. Because you're like, all the soreness that, like, comes in 2 days later.
Oh, your fucking face is all swollen. You can't see. You have to have sunglasses everywhere. You definitely can't take a punch. Like, the whole idea is so stupid, and they don't do that. I mean, maybe they've done that a couple of times throughout history, but that's not a standard thing. In this movie Warrior, they just added their own Hollywood jizz to the soup. They're like, let me just change it. He's going to fight his brother, and then the next day, I'm brilliant. Oh, I'm going to grab my balls. That's what they did. They added their own stupidity to it. Just didn't even make any sense, and it was totally unnecessary. Like, that's you can't. You're changing what martial arts are just to fit your narrative because you're not a good writer. Like, if you were a good writer, you would write about how it actually happens, and you'd make a story about how it actually happens. You wouldn't create some fake thing that you can do,
something
like
that could
fight
be real.
Wars
Yeah.
several times in a day, 2 days in a row. You'd be fucking meat.
Well, it's
You'd
like
be
just give them like superpowers at this point. Just give them like Hadoukens and stuff. If you're
Go
just
back
writing
to Jean-Claude Van Damme movies.
Right.
You got to decide what you are. Are you an excellent dramatic movie with Nick Nolte and Tom? What the fuck's his name? Who's the other guy? The fuck's his name? No. How dare you? The young guy who's Bane.
Oh, Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy. That motherfucker is amazing, right? It's him and Nick Nolte. I mean, they're amazing. But yet they put in this stupid plot idea where they have to fight in 2 days. Like, come on. Just come on.
It's like it's annoying because it's like you're making this world real, and then you're doing something that's like
and
just
it's my
utterly
world.
ridiculous. Yeah,
It's a world where I work.
You're
so
a little
it makes
offended
me,
by like
I'm super offended. I'm super offended.
And it makes it impossible for someone like you to enjoy because it's like if anyone who knows fighting can enjoy. Which, by the way, I will say, and I do even when we talk about old school UFC, there's something that like I'm nostalgic for it. I know you can't have it now; it has to be the sport it is now, and it's evolved way past there. But there was just something so cool about the old UFC,
right?
And there was something about the Conor versus Floyd fight that almost gave you that feeling again of like these two guys from different worlds going in there and like how does this like how does a guy who's doing MMA striking and fucking doing like capoeira stuff on the side how does he go in there and box? And then it turned out Conor actually was just like, oh no, you got to box. Can't do any of that stuff. You get destroyed. So he just went out there and boxed. But it was an interesting, like I came out of it, I was arguing with a lot of friends of mine who are like big boxing fans, and nothing against you guys. God bless boxing. I'm not like as big a fan as I used to be. I'm a huge MMA fan, but I just can't. Like when you look at MMA the way you look at MMA as like the sport of fighting, and the original thing was always figuring out who's better at fighting and how these does. It was just hard for me to not look at the fight with Conor and Floyd and go like, you know, it's like when there was the first clinch. Luis J. Gomez said this to me. Is the first clinch of the fight. He goes, well, that's where Conor would destroy him. Yeah. And then you just sit there watching 10 rounds of a referee saving Floyd Mayweather's life. Like every few seconds, the referee comes in and goes, oh, let me save your life. No, let me save your life. I know you're the greatest ever at this, but you need, even under your rules with your gloves and you're this, you need a ref to keep coming in and saving your life every few seconds. And you'd see it like every time they clinched, like Conor would immediately, almost just instinctually, just like kind of take his back and like step over here.
Yeah.
Because right here's where I can hit you and you can't
And
hit
Floyd
me.
would just cover up and bend over.
Yep.
Like literally bend over.
Guy, come save my life, buddy.
Yeah.
And it's just hard like to not watch that and go, oh.
If he wanted to, he would jump on his back and choke him to death.
And
That
even
would be
in
the
your
end.
even in your sport, like he went 10 rounds. And okay, I know what Mayweather did was brilliant, and he dragged him in. He played it safe and perfectly, but it wasn't a part of the plan to eat that uppercut on the chin. That definitely wasn't a part of the plan. And also, I think there's boxers punch a lot harder than MMA guys do, and there's truth to that too. So Conor's power didn't translate in the way that MMA fans thought it would.
Well, he's just not quite as fluid, and also I think he's probably very nervous. I mean, he's fighting literally the greatest fighter of all time in his first professional boxing
insane.
match. It's so crazy, and yet he still got it to the 10th round. If Floyd, I mean, this is what I said. I said I gave Conor a very small chance of winning a boxing match, very small. So I thought it was like 94% that Floyd would beat the shit out of Conor the way he did, and that Conor would eventually like get tired. Like the guy who did the best assessment of it, in my opinion, was John Danaher. John Danaher, who's a brilliant jiu-jitsu coach, is also a brilliant MMA coach, has got a deep understanding of it. And he basically spelled out exactly what's going to happen because of all the times he's seen of boxers sparring with elite martial artists, that the mixed martial artist does well for a few rounds because it takes a while for the boxer to figure out the timing, and then the efficiency and fluidity of the boxer starts to take over the ring generalship, the understanding of this one isolated particular discipline, and then they dominate. And that's exactly what happened to a T. What I said is I think there's a 94% chance that Floyd Mayweather just boxes the shit out of Conor McGregor. There is a 4% chance that Conor catches him with like an uppercut like he did in the first round and actually stuns him and hurts him and then swarms on him and takes him out. Conor has got ferocious power. It's whether or not he executed that power like he has in MMA, whether he felt he could drain his gas tank like that, especially with 2 months worth of training. Not enough. Not enough to get in shape for a 12-round boxing match against the greatest of all time. But there was a 100% chance that Conor nukes him in a fucking MMA fight. Nukes him. Like I'd be willing to
literally 100.
because Floyd's not going to knock him out with one punch. And Conor could kick his fucking legs out from under him before he got even close enough to punch him. And if they did get to a clinch, which they absolutely would, Conor would ragdoll him to the ground and beat his fucking brains in before he strangled him. 100%.
Yes. Like 100%. Even if you just take out even grappling, I agree with you that Conor's a master of range and he's got excellent kicks.
And if
he can
can
kick the
clinch.
shit out of him and stay out of the area where he's just stay out of his punching range and kick him in the legs and the body.
Well, even if he can clinch, if you don't break him up when he clinches and he can throw knees to the body, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You're fucked. And elbows to the head, he's going to tie you up at the back of the head and smash you. Has that ever happened? No, you don't know what the fuck to do when a guy's doing that. You don't know how to deal with those knees to the face, like when Anderson Silva fucked up Rich Franklin to win the title, when he just plumbed the back of his head and just started smashing knees in his face. And it was clear that Rich really didn't know, he didn't have an answer to that.
Yeah, which was an amazing thing because that was one of those moments like everyone in the MMA world thought Rich was the best. Or not the MMA world, everyone in the UFC world kind of like thought Rich Franklin was the best. But I mean, because that's why I correct myself, because people who knew the MMA scene better and Pride and that stuff knew what Anderson Silva was. But like the average fan of the UFC we hadn't really seen Anderson Silva. I had seen 1 or 2 tapes of him on Pride, and I saw him like maybe not on Pride. I saw him the one where he got ankle locked real quick, and so I didn't really know how good Anderson Silva was. I'd seen him beat Carlos Newton, and that was like all I had on him. So I was like, Rich Franklin will probably.
Well, the
probably
thing
take
wasn't
this guy
the Pride fights. The thing was when he got out of Pride and then fighting in Cage Wars or Cage Warrior. What the fuck was that English
I remember the one you're talking about.
organization?
Cage Rage?
No,
was that it?
It's
that
an
was
English
one?
organization. God damn it! I want to say Cage Wars, but it's not that. Cage Warrior. What the fuck do they call it? Anyway, he went over there and just started
fucking people up.
nuking people.
So like I hadn't seen any of that.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen any of that, and I think I'd guess most UFC fans hadn't seen that either. And they saw Rich Franklin as the champ.
Yeah.
Had beat up a bunch of guys.
The odds were actually in Anderson's favor, though.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, it was one of the weird ones where the odds makers, when he fought Chris Lieben, he was a slight favorite in his first UFC fight, and I was like, get ready for some crazy shit because this motherfucker's on a totally different level. I'm like, I knew him. I'd seen him fight Jorge Rivera and Lee Murray. I saw him hit Tony Ferguson with a step-in uppercut elbow that he had practiced on a pillow at home. He made his wife hold a pillow and practice this technique because he wanted to use it in his fights, and his coaches wouldn't hold the pads for him because they thought it was ridiculous.
And they said, is this true? I think I remember hearing this, but I think it was like in between rounds. He said to one of his coaches, he goes, I think it's open. I think it's there. And they were like, forget about the stupid technique, damn it. Like, it's not going going to be there.
I don't know if that's the case.
I
but
might be wrong about
he
that,
had
but
fucked up Tony Ferguson before that. The reason why I was able to get that off is because it wasn't Tony Ferguson. Excuse me, Tony Fricklin. Tony Fricklin is who he fought.
Yes,
Sorry, my apologies, Tony Ferguson. He fought Tony Fricklin. He hit him with a standing, stepping in uppercut with the elbow, and he was just like another level, maybe 3, 4, 5 levels above Fricklin at the time.
Yeah.
He was just so, and Fricklin was a real veteran. Fricklin was in one of the first UFCs that I ever worked in 1997. He was there, and so that was like his debut in the UFC. I was there when he had his debut. So Anderson was just lighting him on fire before he decided to step in and uppercut him. But I just knew he was on such a different level. But that was a really important learning moment for MMA, because people knew, like, okay, if you get in a fight and a guy is a Muay Thai practitioner on the level of Anderson Silva, you better learn how to deal with this goddamn clinch. So here's Anderson versus Tony Fricklin. And this is Anderson, in my opinion, maybe his prime ever, because he hadn't taken on all the damage and all the crazy fights that he had in the UFC. And by the time he got to Chris Weidman, I mean, he was in his 30s, he's getting older, his body was starting to not perform the way it used to, and then obviously he fucked up and stood in front of Weidman and got left hooked in the head while he was clowning him.
And then it's a lot tougher to come back when you're 40 now and have taken these losses.
But his Muay Thai back then was so fucking tight.
And it was just so levels above what everyone else was doing.
Oh, yeah. They just didn't belong in there with him. Like, look how he's moving around, just sort of like feeling out Tony, trying to find out what Tony's capable of, trying to decide when to move. I mean, he really is like a spider, because he's setting up the web and he's moving around. Eventually he's going to sting you, and you know it's coming, and you know by the time you're moving at him, look at that, boom, 1, 2, he starts kicking you, and now he's coming after you. Oh, shit, bitch. Now you know there's a big difference between the two of you.
And it just feels like even if you don't know anything about fighting, you just know there's levels here.
Yeah.
Like, you can just see it.
Everything he does in this fight is like fucking picture perfect. He steps in. Look at this beautiful Thai clinch. His control of the neck and head was spectacular. Look at that, boom!
And he's bigger than all these guys, stronger than them.
Like knees to the body, man. And Fricklin is fucking throwing down, man. He's doing his best. He was a warrior.
But you'd see it when he went up and fought at 205, and he'd be in the clinch with like Bonner and Forrest Griffin. Like, these guys couldn't do anything to him. So these guys are like just.
He's already fucked here, because he's eating a bunch of really hard shots to the body. And even though he's moving okay, he's like really compromised here. Look at that beautiful right hook and then left low kick. And Anderson fought a lot from the southpaw stance. He could fight from any position he wanted to, but he fought a lot from the southpaw stance, which is also an advantage to a lot of people.
It's amazing how much MMA guys make it look
boom,
like.
Boom! There it is, son. I mean, literally, his arm's gone limp. I mean, watch this. Boom, boom.
Wow, dude.
Boom.
That is nuts. It's nuts. Just the way he moves.
Watch him step in here, though, man. It's so crazy. Watch this. Boom. Step in, uppercut, shit. Elbow, first time ever in MMA. That was Anderson in his prime.
And it was one of those moments where, particularly you have, like, I've had a lot in watching MMA where when someone comes in and beats someone else at their strength.
Right.
And then you have to, like, reorganize your mind where you're like, oh, I thought that guy was like.
Because Frank was a knockout artist.
Like, this guy's, like, got really great hands. Yeah. He's a really good striker. And then, like, a guy like that lets you know, like, oh, there's, like, another world.
Well, you know what it's like
levels.
You got these guys like the Chinese Kung Fu guy, and then you have all these different levels, these like steps along the way in the spectrum. And then you've got like Muay Thai of Anderson, but then you've got like Muay Thai of Sanchai in Thailand. It's like several levels past Anderson and Buakaw and Ramon Deckers and Rob Kamen and the greats, you know, Ernesto Hus. These guys are like even further past that. You know, there's all these crazy, crazy, crazy levels to this thing. And, you know, when you see a guy like Anderson, you see just like for the first time it was in the UFC where you have like legitimate world class, maybe not the best ever in Muay Thai, but legitimate world class Muay Thai skills. You're watching him fight, that's like a professional Muay Thai fighter. And
it seems to me like for whatever reason, I think because on its own it works better in a real fight. So the grappling stuff in MMA, like pretty quickly, we got very high level grapplers. Mm-hmm. Pretty quickly. Like, I mean, from the first UFC, you've got the best jiu-jitsu guys at the time, or at least a representative of the Gracies. And then, you know, you got Olympic level wrestlers in there pretty quickly. Like, I mean, it wasn't too long before like Dan Severn and Mark Coleman and guys like that who had like legit wrestling credits came in. But it took a long time before you got like really, really high level strikers.
Well, you got Maurice Smith.
That's right. Maurice Smith was the guy.
Mark
He was the
Coleman.
first.
He was really the first.
He was the first. Yeah.
Go back to that fight again. Here's something that's interesting to point out.
I guess Bas Rutten was one of the early guys too.
Bas
right?
Rutten was after Maurice.
There weren't too many
yeah.
besides that. Like those guys were like a few who actually, because it took so much to learn all the other shit.
Right, but the difference between Bas and Maurice was that Maurice was more of a tactician and Bas was a destroyer. He was like an intelligent animal. He would just like attack, like vicious, ferocious striking, you know, but real aggressive, but also very technical as well. Whereas Maurice is much more clever, like leg kick dependent. Like Maurice is actually on a higher level in terms of like professional kickboxing than Bas. Bas didn't have like a lot of kickboxing fights. Maurice was a world champion.
Okay.
But Bas had that Holland style, and as an MMA fighter, he was like one of the first guys that we ever saw that could kick so fucking hard. But if you watch this fight, what you could learn is like what Conor McGregor figured out. What Conor McGregor figured out is that what holds a lot of these guys back is movement. And so if you look at Tony Ficklin as he's moving towards Anderson, his movement, he's very limited. Like he can't cover distance quick enough. He has to make these little hop steps.
Right,
He can't just slide in and blast things. Conor is fluid with his movement in and out to the point where he can step forward, and obviously wouldn't be able to do that with Anderson Silva, but he can step forward and step in and step out. Like when he fought Jose Aldo, one of the most important parts of that fight was that Aldo was trying to figure out the movement of Conor. Like go to that fight, Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor, and what Conor was doing so good was sliding forward and sliding back.
There's like that one moment, because it's a very short fight, but there's the one moment where he like feints a thing and jumps back.
Right here. See, like you stand in front of him, see how he pops.
Yep.
But look how like he's in and out. He's moving a lot, and it's a different thing. Boom, he slides back and drops the fucking left hammer on his chin. And it's that movement that's so critical in a really high-level fight. Like, look how fluid he slides back and launches that punch at the same time.
It's very interesting to me, too, because it was a different intensity in his movement than like when he fought other guys like Chad Mendez and other, because he respected what Aldo throws. Like, Aldo throws heat, and especially in that first round when Aldo's furious at you for disrespecting him all. Like, he knows he's coming with like a bomb, but But it's superior movement.
It's also new, unorthodox movement. Boom. I mean, in a lot of ways, they've been doing that shit in karate tournaments forever.
Right.
But people hadn't figured it out in MMA yet. I mean, if you look at a lot of what Conor had done with his stance and his movement, a lot of it resembles what you see in like karate point tournaments, where they would leap in and drop a shot on you and leap out. But they weren't fighting stationary people like Aldo that just charged forward. But Aldo got used to fighting in that manner.
Yeah, fighting Muay Thai guys and that kind of MMA look. It's a completely
MMA
different look.
The wrestling look. Yeah.
Well, you know what's really fascinating to me just on this kind of evolution was, God, what's his name? Cejudo? The guy who fought Demetrius Johnson, Henry Cejudo, who just, I don't know,
who fights like him now.
Now he all of a sudden he adopted this style, and you're like, holy shit, this style gives people real problems in MMA.
Yeah, man.
And it's like I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but it reminds me a little bit of almost like Machida type thing, like, but
You're
it's
not
like
wrong
this,
at all.
it's this weird karate kind of thing that. It's like this weird evolution. Like once you have all the other shit, and what Conor does is he's also got really good traditional boxing. So like not a lot of MMA guys couldn't do 10 rounds with Mayweather. They get, you know, like he's also got boxing, so he can kind of mix it up with like traditional boxing attacks and this crazy other shit. So what's crazy about him is he'll be like throwing like these crazy spinning like cartwheel kicks, and then he'll just have like a 1-2 that was like perfect, which that's new to MMA. Like we haven't seen a lot of that in the past, and you know it's
those kicks are longer too. You're dealing with something that reaches much further than the traditional Muay Thai techniques or straight boxing techniques. He's throwing side kicks. His head is so far away from you. When he's throwing a side kick, if he's touching you in the chest with a side kick, there's no opportunity for you to counterpunch. He's way over there. He's bent sideways. His head is way out of reach. You might be able to catch him with a kick if he comes forward after he drops the side kick if you're in range, but you might get pushed back. There's a lot of factors involved to fighting a guy who fights like that, and Cejudo's figured that out, and then he just dropped some bombs on Wilson Hayes.
Which is, you know, I mean, obviously, like, you know, Demetrius Johnson is like head and shoulders above
everybody
else, and he made quick work of him.
Yeah.
But that was like, at least to me, like a little like glimpse of like, oh, well, maybe if this guy is this good a grappler and is figuring striking out like this, maybe he's the guy who could, like be a good contender.
It may happen very well. I mean, he might challenge him one day. But what Henry Cejudo represents is like extreme talent, a real sponge for knowledge and information, and he's got a guy that's in his division that's the king, that's, in my opinion, the greatest martial artist of all time. I don't think there's anybody that's been a better representation of what's possible in modern martial arts better than Mighty Mouse, because he just doesn't get hit and he fucks everybody up and you can't hit him, man. He's coming at you and then all of a sudden he's over here and then you got a knee in your body and then you got punched in the face and you're trying to figure out what the fuck's happening. All of a sudden you're on your back and he's dropping hammer fists on you, and you, by the time you're reacting to that, he's got you in an armbar. You're like, what the fuck just happened to me?
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
Steamrolled.
He fights like he's a specialist at every discipline.
Yeah.
Like he's like you feel like he could beat all the specialists at their discipline
He
in
might
MMA.
be able
It's like
to.
what George St. Pierre used to kind of do. But yeah, I do
But on a
think
different level, though.
in modern MMA and more dominant, not going to decisions, destroying everybody. He's about to break the record. Hard to argue with.
About to. You know, who knows? Ray Borg's still a tough customer.
You're right. I shouldn't grant him the
Like
victory.
when Weidman knocked out Anderson Silva, nobody saw that coming. This is a crazy sport.
Oh, it's not. It is a crazy sport, and it's like it seems like nobody can escape it.
Right.
Like it's like it takes the toughest, most invincible person you can think of, and like Anderson Silva was a ninja, an untouchable ninja, and then you see him crying in the center of the ring with like a shattered, not shattered, but whatever, split up shin bone. I mean, it's like. It's Chuck Liddell, like all
Cain
these
Velasquez.
guys. Cain,
we saw Junior Dos Santos drop a bomb on Cain Velasquez, and Cain collapsed. You're like, wow,
and
even
then
Cain can get KO'd.
And then Junior Dos Santos, who at that point, then I was like, well, after that, you're like, I guess we're living in Junior Dos Santos' world. I mean, this guy's destroyed everyone, and then to watch him get oof.
He got nuked by Cain in the rematch. Cain just came back and beat the fuck out of him. But Cain in the first fight really probably shouldn't have been fighting, but it was the first big fight on Fox, and he had a fucked up knee, man.
That's
he
right.
couldn't move right. And he just couldn't get out of the way.
His only two losses were when he was coming off an injury. I believe he was coming off an injury against Fabricio Verdum as well.
Well, he was always coming off injuries by that time.
That is a problem.
But the real problem with the Fabricio Verdum fight was that he didn't prepare in Mexico City, because Mexico City's at 7,500 feet above sea level, which is where I was in Utah last week. I couldn't imagine if you didn't train there that you could be adapted to it the way Fabricio was, because Fabricio's smart. He was there for like, I think, a couple months. At sea level, training, doing his entire camp in Mexico, like way, even above 7,500. I think he got up to the 8,000s.
Yeah,
I think they rented a house.
It seemed in the fight like that made a big difference. Pretty hard to argue because Cain is known as being the cardio king. Fabricio, no knock on his cardio, but that's not what he's known for. He's not known for being like the cardio. And to see him outlast him, it was like, oh yeah, that's almost. It's almost like Cain had so much confidence in his cardio because this is what he's been known for since like before he got in the UFC.
Yeah,
it's like he's got this unbelievable tank that he was like, no, I'll be fine with that, and it didn't work out okay. But I'll say, and I know he's an injury case, but like the Cain Velasquez that showed up to UFC 200. That fought Travis Brown.
Yeah.
I don't see any heavyweight beating that guy.
Well, I don't know. Fabricio beat him. I mean, I don't know if he would be able to beat him again. But see, the thing is, Fabricio, his striking improved radically. And he's got long reach. He's a big, tall guy. And he's strong as fuck. And if you take him down, good goddamn luck.
That's not
and
a
that's
good
what everybody
idea.
found. If there's another argument for anybody being the greatest heavyweight of all time besides Cain, it's Fabricio. And Fabricio might have a better argument because Fabricio submitted all the greats. He submitted Fedor Emelianenko, submitted Minotauro Nogueira, submitted Cain Velasquez. I mean, Fabricio submitted fucking everybody.
He's got some amazing wins.
If he didn't get KO'd by Stipe and fighting out of composure, he was fighting very emotionally,
That was crazy.
chasing Stipe. I mean, he just got wild. He was in Brazil. He wanted to fucking get after it. You know, he was pumped up. They're in Brazil. He's the heavyweight champ. He's fired up. But I think he might have underestimated what a bad motherfucker Stipe Miocic is and how the Stipe could do the same thing Conor did, slide away and drop that right hand. Like, Stipe's a fucking elite athlete.
Stipe's a monster. He's a monster. I think I slept on him a little bit too much for a long time. But no, you see it, and he's proved it like in his last few fights.
100%.
I mean, but I was blown away by how reckless. Fabricio fought him in that. I mean, he just charged him, like straight on charged him. That's a dangerous way to fight any MMA fighter.
Yeah, it was
like
he made
modern
a
day.
mistake. He made a mistake, and I think he made that mistake because he got caught before that. I think he got clipped before that, and he got emotional because he got clipped, and he tried to just like really ramp it up and overcompensate. Like if you watch that fight before Stipe knocks him out, he catches him a couple of times.
Yeah,
Stipe's a sharp boxer, very very sharp hands, and he catches you on the chin. Woo, he could put people away. Obviously, he's putting everybody away now. He put away Alistair Overeem, arguably the greatest striker who ever fought in MMA. You know, K1 Grand Prix champion, Strikeforce champion,
got
Dream
dropped
champion.
and got right back up and knocked him out. You know,
Yeah.
that's like, that's pretty impressive.
It's a fucking animal. Yeah. And when I was talking to him after the fight, he thought he got kicked. Like, he didn't even remember he got punched. Yeah, it was all, he was like, I don't know what the fuck happened. He wasn't sure. He's like, all I know is I won.
Yeah, well, both of them thought they won.
He's the highest level so far. You know, Stipe in his athleticism, his ability to move, his ability to overcome obstacles. Like, Junior had kicked the shit out of his leg to the point where he had this giant hematoma on his shin, and he still knocked him out.
Yeah, that was a very interesting fight. I mean, it was super quick, but it was like a lot of action super quick. Now, I'd love to see a healthy Kane come back and fight
I just
Stipe.
I don't know what the extent of his injuries are and why he's been sidelined so long. I mean, you'd have to talk to him personally. But what I'm hoping is that I know a lot of it was back issues and shoulder issues. He had shoulder surgery, knee surgery, back surgery. I mean, he had several surgeries. So it's just that style is so aggressive and so physically dependent. I mean, he's just so fucking overwhelming that a lot of it is like mental toughness, the mental toughness to push past everybody.
Right.
Sometimes your body just can't keep up.
Right, and so in general, probably every high-level MMA, UFC fighter at this point, I mean, what they're doing to their body, what they're putting their body through is at a lot. You know,
Right.
I mean, it's like really pushing yourself to the absolute limit constantly. Then, as you mentioned, his style is particularly, you know, like kind of physical. And he comes from a camp that's notoriously a very, very tough camp.
Yeah, super tough.
Those guys are like known for like getting in wars and like really, really training hard.
Yeah.
So I'm sure all of that shit doesn't.
It's too bad because if Kane had such amazing cardio and great footwork and beautiful striking technique as well as like real elite wrestling technique, if Kane fought more in a Mighty Mouse sense, it's just one of the reasons what made Mighty Mouse so good is that like if Kane used his cardio not in like a blunt way but more in a surgical way.
Right.
You know, if Kane, like in the Junior Dos Santos fight in particular, he caught him like real early in the second fight and clipped him with the right hand and hurt him and rocked him and just decided to maul him. Just got all over him and mauled him. But he took a lot of damage in the process. They both did. They both hit each other, and Kane overwhelmingly dominated the fight. But it wasn't the way Mighty Mouse does. Mighty Mouse doesn't get hit.
Yeah.
He's there, and then he's here, and then you're getting hit. You know, and then he's on your clinch, and then boom, you get a knee in the chin, and then boom, you're getting elbowed, and then boom, you're getting tripped. And then he's just doing things. He's got this repertoire of possibilities that no one else has. Whereas Kane just had this ferocious attitude, powerful striking, and ungodly cardio, just coming at you, bitch. Here we go.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of one of the things Mayweather was talking about. I see him like in a few different interviews leading up to the Conor fight, but just talking about the fact, like it's a crazy thing that like it does almost seem like fans like the guy who takes a lot of head damage more.
Yeah,
like they don't like the guy who avoids those wars and avoids that strength.
Yeah,
but it's like you sit there and look at the way Muhammad Ali left and the way Floyd Mayweather's leaving.
Oh yeah,
and it's like, okay, I get it. The fans love rope-a-dope more, but like.
I
don't know. It's kind of hard to argue with that.
Yeah, Floyd going out beating Conor is really the perfect way to do it too, because you know he really didn't take much damage in that fight. Took one good solid uppercut in the first round, and then kind of like took over. So he gets this big 50th win, and then really gets to show that it's really about boxing. It's not about slugging and standing there. But when people talk about him, they don't talk about him with the same reverence that they talk about like Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward, because they were more entertaining. Like the people that get entertained, you know, by the style, the fighter, the wild, crazy slugger. They love those guys, you know?
I mean, we all love those guys. Like, I mean, who doesn't love, you know, Travis Brown versus Andrei Arlovsky or like a fight like that? I mean, it's like and to see things like, to see somebody come back after getting, like there's something incredible about that. It's like, it's an amazing thing that MMA, like when you were talking about Stipe not knowing whether it was a kick or a punch, it's this amazing thing that MMA does where you find out like someone's true character when they're in a storm, you know, and like how they come, and that's amazing. But if you are that person, you know, it's just a little bit different. Like there's human elements involved too, and like you got a family, you got kids, you want to think for the rest of your life. You want to like, and how can you argue with Floyd? I mean, the guy made the most money and took the least damage.
Yeah.
And has the best record. I mean, how can you argue with that?
And figured out a way to neutralize really dangerous people like Canelo Alvarez. I mean, forget about the Conor fight. He was out, you know, Conor was obviously outmatched, but if you look at his fights with really elite knockout artists like Manny Pacquiao, neutralized him. Canelo Alvarez neutralized him. I mean, pretty much everybody he fought. He just fought a style that was more entertaining because you wanted him to lose.
Right.
You know, his brilliance was that he got you to hate him so that you would buy a fight hoping that the guy was going to kick his ass.
So real, I remember doing this thing. I was on a radio show that Brian Stan called into. It was an MMA radio show on Sirius Radio that they used to use me on sometimes. And Brian Stan called in. And I remember he was just talking about like, I forget what the topic was. At first it was like Joe Silva had just left and he wasn't matchmaking anymore. And he just started talking about how tough the job is of matchmaking and how much it fucks with you when someone gets knocked out real bad and then you're like, maybe I shouldn't have made that match. You know what I mean? Like you kind of feel like, oh, maybe I threw someone in at the wrong time. And I was kind of like, oh man, that's a human element I really never think about in that job. And then we were talking about GSP coming back. And he was like, yeah, I just don't think GSP should come back. Like, what's he got to prove and what's he going to do? Why risk the brain damage, And then it's like this weird thing, like you never think about that as a fan, but when you start meeting the guys and they actually become people, like I met Michael Bisping, and Lewis does a show with him. They do a podcast, Believe You Me, really great podcast.
How do they do it? They do it through Skype?
Yeah, they Skype, I believe. Yeah, so he's in LA and Lewis is in New York. They Skype it, and then like when they're on the coast, they'll do it together. But so like you get to know them, like hang a few times, and like you're friends, and then you're kind of like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to see you go fight one of these killers.
Right.
Like just fight GSP and then retire after that, dude. Like what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like you've had a great career. You're the champ. You get a huge money fight now. You're great at that commentating thing. It's just like when you know someone personally, it's a little bit more like nah, dude, just. But when you're just a fan, it's like, all right, I want to see you fight Yoel Romero and then Whitaker and then this guy and then. But like when you know someone, you're like, that guy's a monster. I don't know. Like,
makes my job way harder if I like the guy.
I imagine.
I know it's going to be a mismatch. Like, ooh, you find out somebody you really care for is going to fight somebody that is just going to light him up, and you're like, ooh, how are you going to win this?
You had that very public moment with Brendan Shaw, but it was a very interesting, compelling moment because it's like a thing where it's like, yeah, you're talking to your friend, but you're also an MMA analyst.
Yeah, I'm talking to a good friend who I knew as a good friend was already 1 foot out the door and had a bunch of other things that were going on and was one of the rare guys that has massive potential to do things outside the sport.
Yeah, he's killing it. He's doing great. Yeah.
I mean, I was right. Look, I mean, he's smashing it with his podcast, smashing it with the Fighter and the Kid podcast he does with Callan, smashing it with his live touring.
It was amazing to see him. He did a fucking great job on all the stuff leading up to Conor Bryce. Like, he was excellent. He was like the only MMA analyst who was in there kind of breaking shit down. It was great.
No,
so,
yeah,
great. It's like why? So all that to just have one or two more fights and maybe take some real bad.
He didn't really see one thing. If he really wanted to do that, like if he was obsessed and that's what he wanted to do, he wanted to win the heavyweight title, and that was what 100% of his focus was. But he wasn't there. I mean, maybe it was when he first started his career, and oftentimes your motivation shifts. You get knocked out a few times, and he had been knocked out several times by then. He got knocked out by Minotauro. He got knocked out by Big Ben Rothwell. He got smashed by Travis Brown. He got knocked out by Roy Nelson. And these are out cold knockouts. So, like, there was so many of them, and I was seeing it so often. And then towards the end, I was noticing just a lack of enthusiasm. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same fire that allowed him to, like, knock out Mirko Cro Cop. There wasn't the same sort of intensity.
You told me last time I was on the show that you've experienced that smart guys have a tougher time coming back from getting knocked out. Because I found that really interesting. Maybe that's part of the case with him. It's like it's hard to avoid knowing the information.
Yeah, well, certainly, I mean, if you're a person who, I mean, you could be a smart person and just compartmentalize things and figure out how to control the variables in your mind and just be refocused on what you're doing. It's not to say that people who come back aren't smart. But I think, I mean, people. It's not to say also that people who fight aren't smart, because a lot of people think of fighters as not being smart. I think that's not true at all. I think there's a lot of people who fight who aren't smart, but I think the people who excel have exceptional mind power as well as physical power. I think the people
some of them are like very
smart.
I mean,
very smart.
you look like a guy like Dominic Cruz. It's like a very smart guy. I mean, there's guys like that.
Brian
who are like
Stan's
Brian Stan,
smart
very
too,
intelligent guy.
And then when you go to champions, like Mighty Mouse is super smart. He's a very, very articulate guy and doesn't show any damage at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some meatheads also out there.
For sure.
Like, but you know, it's certainly like a mix. It's yeah.
Carlos Condit, he's another one. There's a lot of guys who fight that just aren't like that, though. There's a lot of guys who are just like super aggressive and they just do well and they kick ass. And, you know, the guys who know that they're experiencing traumatic brain injury. They understand the consequences they're unavoidable unless there's some new medical breakthrough that allows you to heal CTE, which is super possible.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you described the medical breakthroughs we have now, 50 years ago, you'd be talking about, magic. So, yeah.
My good buddy, Steve Graham, was on the UF ski team like in the 1980s. And he had scars. When I first met him, he had already had in his life, I want to say he's had more than 20 knee surgeries. And I think I'm being super conservative because I think it's way more than that. I think he literally he's had 50 surgeries, including eye surgeries. He's had shoulder surgery, everything. But when I met him, his knees were so fucked up. He had these big slices up and down the side of his knees where they had opened him up and tried to screw things back together again from skiing, just mangling his knees in the old days of skiing. And those same operations today, I have one on this knee. You can't even see the scar. It's little tiny dots because they did it arthroscopically and they put it in a cadaver unit and it healed in 6 months. I was doing jiu-jitsu again. No pain, no loss of range of motion. Everything feels stronger than it felt before. So that's just the medical science that occurred in 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years from his operation to my operation. What's it going to be 20 years from now? It's totally possible they'll develop some sort of stem cell technique to regenerate brain tissue.
Yeah, well, this is why it's so crazy the moment human history we're at where we're like, guys, if we can just not kill each other for another couple years, we might do some really beautiful, amazing shit.
Right.
We really might.
We might.
It's
that's why it's crazy that one of our big threats is North Korea.
Yeah.
Because that represents one of the oldest styles of running a country ever.
Yeah, and it's really, I think Trump's been really bad on that issue, and that is terrifying. I was really happy when you had Michael Malice on because I've learned a lot about North Korea from that guy.
He's great.
Yeah, he
knows
excellent.
so much about it. His book, Dear Reader, is excellent.
It's an excellent book, and he's just a fascinating human being. That guy, but it's it's like you have, as we were saying before, it's like a hostage situation. But the guy holding the hostages has nukes, which makes that a very different type of hostage situation.
And he's shooting them in the sky.
Yeah, but
he's shooting
also
the duds over Japan.
Yes, but there also is people, because again, the media, which just absolutely has a blind spot for the military-industrial complex and the horror of American wars. So you don't get the full picture. I think to me, it's very logical why he's shooting off rockets left and right. Self-preservation is a pretty obvious motivator. Yeah. And people like Gaddafi, who come out and say, oh, okay, international community, you said you don't want us to have nuclear arms, so then we'll disarm. We'll end our nuclear program. They do that, we move in there and throw them out. And Gaddafi ends up getting sodomized to death. So that's if you're this guy, you're well, that I'm going to not go that route.
Right.
So now I'm going to show you, and basically he's showing you, I can fucking nuke South Korea. I can nuke these fucking places if you come at me. That being said, he's a madman.
He's definitely a madman.
Who's holding his people, hostage. And it's horrific. But there are certain, if you have a hostage situation, there are some reasonable ways to handle that and some ridiculous ways to handle that. So when you have a hostage situation, I think it's reasonable to negotiate with the guy. I think it's reasonable to take him out. If you have a shot, you know what I'm saying? If someone has a shot and too many people won't be hurt, we can take him out, take the shot. What you don't do is stand outside and start talking shit to the guy who's got the hostages.
Yeah, no, Trump's not thinking of it as anything other than a Rosie O'Donnell.
Yes,
the way he talks shit about Rosie O'Donnell, he's calling this guy Rocket Man.
Which I kind of like with Rosie O'Donnell. There's a thing about Trump. I'm no fan of his, but there's something I kind of get a thrill. I got a kick out of how he'd piss off people who I'm not a huge fan of.
Right.
And I
Lion Ted.
I'll tell you though, I love
Crazy Hillary.
When he did the thing.
Crazy Bernie.
Yes, all this
Lion
stuff.
Hillary.
I love the nicknames until it was Rocket Man. I was really into the nicknames. And you're like, whoa, hey, buddy, this isn't funny anymore. This guy's got nukes. But there's the look, when it was a Morning Joe, the co-host Mika Brzezinski.
Yeah.
So she made a thing in on the show where there was a picture on Time magazine with Trump with this, with his hands under his arms, and she made a joke on the show, and she goes, "Oh, how come he doesn't want to show his hands? Maybe because they're teeny." Okay,
right.
That was the joke she made. Which is essentially, it's a little dick joke. I mean, that's what she was making on the show. So Donald Trump immediately tweets out a thing about her, and he goes, "When she was at my When she was at my
Mar-a-Lago.
party, she had scars from the facelift.
No, she's still bleeding.
She was still
badly
bleeding from the
plastic
facelift.
surgery.
Right. From that.
They asked me to sit with her. Did not go.
Yes. So it's this thing now. Then of course the media goes right into the mode of like, how could you insult a woman's looks? And it's like, I don't know, man. Like if you can't take the heat, get out of the fucking.
Well,
if you're gonna make
fun
a
of his
little dick
hands.
joke,
Yeah.
and then people were like. Actual journalists, like grown-up people who consider themselves journalists, I saw reporting a week later, it's been confirmed that Mika Brzezinski wasn't even at that event and didn't even... Like, yeah, you fucking idiots. This isn't a real thing. He's just getting her back.
Yeah.
Like she hit him and he's hitting her back. Like, yes, if you're vain enough to be having plastic surgery, probably you're not going out while you're still bleeding from the plastic surgery. But like the point is, and I kind of like that about Trump. It's like, oh, finally someone being unapologetic and being like, oh, you hit me, I'll
this
hit
is
you
where
back.
I disagree with you hardcore because I think it's
Okay.
stupid and childish. And like what he did
Well,
was
it is
so
kind of.
fucking dumb. It's beneath being the president of the United States. And this idea that you're going to make up a story about a woman bleeding from plastic surgery to get over because she said you have little hands, that's some weak bitch shit.
Okay, as you repeat it back to me, it does sound like some weak
Bitch shit. If that was your friend, hold on a second.
Okay.
If that was your friend, and one of your friends was making fun of the fact that you had small hands, and so you went on a radio show or a podcast and made up a whole story about him
All right, fair
having
enough.
that's a bitch move.
Okay, so I'll agree with you on that. You're right. It is kind of a bitch move.
No, it's 100% a bitch move.
So it's so I'll agree with you. It
Unless
is
it really happened.
Even so, I could get where you could say it's kind of a bitch move.
Right.
Like you should be above this. But I get what I enjoy about it is if then everybody else, like 95% of the mainstream media's reaction is, how could you attack a woman's looks? And you're like, you dummies. Maybe you'll think next time about. I hate the thing that Mika feels entitled to make a small dick joke and then feels entitled the next day to play the, are you insulting a woman's looks? It's like
because she's not. It's actually worse, right? If he was telling the truth. Because what she's saying, he has no control over. He has no control over the size of his hands that he was born with. But she does have control over whether or not she's so vain she lets a doctor stick a tube down her throat and cut her half-alive body and stitch it tighter to give the illusion of youth. Now, I don't think that really happened. At least that's what a lot of people are saying. It didn't really happen. But if it did happen, and he was talking about that after she was talking shit, then it makes sense. What doesn't make sense is it's not true.
Yeah. So I guess what I do agree with you, the point you made. So I will walk back that a little bit. You're right. It's kind of a shitty move, but there's just something
You like the fact that he's willing to do that.
Someone's like fighting back against the PC authoritarianism, which I do see as a really big fucking problem. I don't see this as like a little problem that's annoying. Like I think it's a really big problem, and I don't care about the dignity of the president. I like that being undermined as much as possible. I don't think the whole idea that there's dignity to this bullshit job that shouldn't even exist, I hate. So I like that aspect of Trump.
Dude, what'd you think about when Bourdain got shit because they asked him at the airport? Just one of them TMZ things. You're walking through the airport. They go, if you had to cook for Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, what would you serve? He goes, hemlock. And then he leaves. That's a fucking Bourdain throwaway funny punchline.
That's just
obviously.
good. That's just good chef humor there.
God damn, dude, I was looking at all the comments, and so many of them were using hashtag POTUS to talk about POTUS that way, and to talk. I mean, they were talking about like he's the king, like these sheep.
But they also switch sides. It's like the Obama people and the Trump people are so happy to just literally one day. Oh, you take that position and I'll take this position now. No problem. No feeling of like, oh, this is a little bit weird. I was literally 3 days ago lecturing people about how he's our president, and now I'm like, not my president. Like, you don't feel any, and there's this thing that I go, I remember you said this, and I've quoted this many times on my show. Part of the problem, my podcast. There, get a plug-in.
Powerful part of the problem.
Powerful part of the problem. No more alliteration. But I don't know if you were quoting someone or this was yours originally, but you were describing the Occupy Wall Street movement, and you used the white blood cells as the way to describe them. You might have been quoting someone else when you said it, or maybe it was yours originally, but I remember hearing you say this. And
I think it was mine. What I was saying is it's obviously there's a disease, and they don't know exactly what it is, but the white blood cells are moving in, and they're surrounding this infection.
That's right.
And they're trying to figure out what it is.
I thought it was like such a perfect analogy, and it applies to Occupy Wall Street. It also applied to like the Tea Party movement and some other, right, the point of being like, look, a white blood cell does not understand the complexity of a virus. It doesn't have the cure for a virus. It doesn't have like that, but it knows corruption, rush.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. It's like corrupt and rush. And I think that a lot of the Trump thing is that too. It's like white blood cells, and they know that this PC authoritarian thing that Trump fights that.
Right.
They know that's the virus, and this is to them the most anti. Now,
Twitter audit report. He has half fake people. You know, I did that to me today, and I posted it on Instagram. I'm very happy with the results.
You're
But I
doing
was
way better than Trump.
way better than that motherfucker. I don't have any fake people on Twitter because, first of all, I'm not the president. I think when you're the president, you automatically get like a shit ton of fake people. Billionaire GOP patron behind Trump's social media bot army. Yeah, of course he has a media bot. Of course. Why would he not use that? I mean, it's just like, to him, that's like a tool. Like what? It's like when the samurais refused to adopt gunfire. They refused to adopt firearms. They're like, fuck that shit. We're using bows and arrows and swords like men. And they got gunned down. that was the end of the Japanese Empire as we knew it at the time. They
It's
just
an agent
refused.
version of what Kodak did.
Oh, right.
Like Kodak
yeah.
was like when digital came out, they were like,
Yeah.
we don't really like digital. We'll be the film guys.
Yeah, fuck off.
You guys go with digital.
And then after a while, they tried. They put out
too
some
late.
digital cameras, but then the cameras were on phones.
That's
Too
right.
late, bitch. You missed the whole thing.
You were an industry leader.
Yeah, you went way behind the curve.
But you're the #1 typewriter distributor now.
Yeah,
that's all it means.
If you're running for president, Dave Smith, and you don't use a bot army, I'll be very disappointed in you. I'll be like, how can I give you my support if you're not even willing to use a bot army? We need bots.
We're talking about Smith 24 now?
Yeah,
You're getting in my
Smith
24?
24.
I think bots are like old technology
Oh,
at
you're
that
right.
point.
You're right.
I'm
I'm
like,
sorry.
dude, I'm not going to get elected with that crap.
How short-sighted of me.
I go, dude, that's 2020 thinking.
That's bullshit thinking. Yeah. The new stuff is all, you got to figure out how to hack into neural implants.
That's right. I'm also, a lot of my campaign is going to be running against the previous 4 years of the Kanye West administration and everything that they did wrong.
right.
I'm going to be like, look, Trump didn't solve the problem. Kanye didn't solve the
Right.
problem. Now let's take a nice libertarian position. We'll be
By
ready.
then, Kanye will have established a colony in Africa, and he will have redesigned Calabasas in Africa, and they'll all be just driving around in Bentleys and shit and ducking lions.
It's like, it really is though. Like it's almost like anything seems plausible.
It's a reality show. We're living in a reality show.
But it is a thing that it is like Andrew Breitbart said. This is what I've realized over the last year is that politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah.
That was the truth. I completely missed this. Or maybe not completely, but I definitely underplayed how important the culture is and how that really dictates. It's not like, oh, if you went to like Central Africa tomorrow and went, don't worry, I changed the minimum wage law, like things will
Right.
be okay. There's a cultural element that you have to account for also. And the Donald Trump thing, it's just kind of like, in a way, what's so interesting to me is it's like, okay, so like Trump's a buffoon and he's a cartoon. I mean, literally a cartoon.
Right.
Like he's got the color of
body,
him, the color of his skin, the color of his hair. Like you watch CNN.
Poorly fitting suits,
Yes.
and his overweight body,
It's
and
like-
his crazy hair.
You're watching the news and then a cartoon character
Yeah.
comes on. But in this weird way, he's had this ability to like hold up a mirror to the rest of American society.
Well, he's also a billionaire, so he's undeniably a winner as far as we decide.
Hard to argue
and
that.
then on top of that, he's unapologetic. And that's something we all admire because we all wish we could do that because we can't.
And that's something that pisses off the left very much.
Yes.
Like that I think is right at the heart of why they hate Trump, which is something I'm fascinated by. And I think it is. I really think being an unapologetic white man rubs the left wrong. Like, look, you can be a white man and you can be an ally. But you gotta be down here. You know, you can't be like up here. You can't be like, hey, I have an opinion and this is how I feel. You gotta be down here like, I have an opinion and I know my opinion's been overrepresented throughout history.
Jamie Kilstein's taken enough heat. You don't have to go after him again.
Jamie's a
right
good guy.
here on this podcast like you just did. I saw what you did.
No,
Jamie's a good guy.
I will welcome
But
Jamie back.
I will too.
I
He
will,
can come
I
back
will
to
with
manhood.
open arms.
Yes,
welcome
come
Jamie back.
He did
some silly things.
Got a little carried away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People make bad
Fucked
decisions.
up.
He got
We all fuck
influenced
up.
by a silly ideology.
Yeah.
And it came out. But
And he did some great work for those people. Like there's a fucking speech that he did in front of this giant thing in Brooklyn. I forget what it was about, but he was doing this speech about Donald Trump and about Black Lives Matter. And it was like really well worded stuff, whether you agree with it or not. Like he did good work inside that little sort of paradigm.
yeah, I met Jamie Kilstein when I was like a brand new comedian, like just starting stand-up comedy, and he was, to me, like doing things that were really cool. Like he was on the road with Stanhope, and like to me that was like, oh,
Right.
you're like, you made it. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing. Like you're doing the thing that we all want to do. And he was just super kind and helpful to me when I was a young comic. And so I always just have like as a person, I like Jamie.
Right.
And all the things I don't like about Jamie were me like seeing him on your show or seeing something he tweeted or something like that. So it's like, as a person, I always liked him. And then the public persona, like, he owes a few people apologies, but I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all vulnerable to a certain extent, and we're vulnerable to, like, if you tap into a vein and you have success with a certain way of behaving and thinking, and you put blinders on because this is benefiting you.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that financially with people, what we were talking about before. You see that culturally, socially, and I think Jamie tapped into like this social vein of success in very extreme ideology, this extreme feminist, male feminist ally ideology, the denial of the differences between the men and the women, and it's like he's a cliche in a lot of ways, right? Because he's a small guy, and he's very slight, and you always see a small guy who's a vegan and a feminist. You're like, oh, it's just he's one of those guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you fall into these weird sort of predetermined patterns of behavior, these categories, and he just was a black belt at that, but also banging chicks.
turns out you can't be in that world and also like pussy, as it turns out.
That's so crazy. I mean, isn't that the ultimate feminist? I mean, he loves women top to bottom. I don't know what the actual issue that they had with him. I don't really know.
No, I don't either.
But
But I will say this, okay, that he hangs out in that social justice warrior crowd that he was hanging out with. They will throw out the rape word for anything.
Everything.
You can look at someone the wrong way, and they'll call that rape. And what they accused Jamie of was inappropriate and manipulative behavior toward women.
Yeah.
So
trying to get pussy.
I mean, literally means trying to get pussy. Like, it's not even, you're not even exaggerating. If you go, like, to them, in this social justice warrior world, if you were to be like, hey, why don't we like get out of here and go back to my place? And you're like, no, we can't. You go, come on.
Yeah.
She said no, and then you said, come on. That is like, inappropriate, manipulative behavior.
There was a skeptics conference, and a man in an elevator asked a woman if she wanted to come to his room and have some coffee, and she did a whole speech the next day about how men should not, if they're with a woman alone and it's late at night, do not ask them to coffee because you're gonna, imply that this woman is in danger and make her feel uncomfortable and all this different crazy shit. Like, oh, so a guy was trying to fuck you. Doesn't that happen all the time? Like, you're making a speech about this, trying to control the behavior of men to the point where they're not men anymore.
Yes,
and trying to shape them and form them into some weird sort of PC version, if you would like, this no biological difference between the men and the women, and men being only allies, and like what?
Yeah, it's so strange. The whole thing is so weird. And like, it's always these people who, seem to be so resentful and angry at the male-female relationship and interplay, and like, oh, a guy wanting to fuck you is so horrible.
Coincidentally, almost always not attractive.
You don't see a lot of 10s walking around going like, oh, it's so unfair.
There's a few that sneak in there.
A few. But you don't see a ton of them
They're like
walking
black
around.
Republicans.
Well, here's the thing.
They're like the Sheriff Clarks.
Yes, that's right. And they put them right up front. Like, see, we got a couple.
Look at her tits.
That's right.
She's got giant tits and a little waist. She's a fucking feminist.
Well, the truth is, if you want to get into a conversation, a real, honest conversation about privilege, right, and who has privilege and who doesn't have privilege, I mean, hot chick privilege is pretty strong. Yeah. I mean, but, hot chicks walk around in a different world than regular women and men do. I mean, it's just a different thing, and that's part of the nature of. But whatever. I mean, that's like who human beings are. But it's like you don't hear her complaining about it as much because she's winning at this exchange.
Right, and women have to like sort of keep their mouth shut about that shit. They have to like kind of, well, let her get away with it. We're working on our end over here. And it's, I saw this tweet this woman put out that said, pro tip, if you don't ever date a man who doesn't identify himself as a feminist. And I was like, that is so crazy. That's such a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, pro tip is one of the douchiest things you could ever say and not say something funny. If you say pro tip, what you say after that better be preposterous.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
You say pro tip and you're serious, you're a fucking condescending, angry person from the jump. I feel like
it's very rarely a very successful pro who's giving me this pro tip.
Second of all, the idea of every man that you date should be a feminist. Well, every man you date shouldn't be a person who discriminates. I agree with that. They should be open-minded. They should be egalitarian. But the idea that they have to subscribe to a feminist ideology, they just can't just be fair and honest and curious and have real conversations with you, open and objective. That's not good enough. No, they have to identify with this ideology that the only way you can ever have equality, true equality within the sexes, is if the man identifies as being a feminist. Like, that's what feminism is. Feminism is not support of women. No, feminism is total uniformity, and there's no discrimination whatsoever. And until that happens, you have to be a feminist.
Yeah, and feminism to me is like modern day feminism, at least. It's just like a hate group. I mean, I just don't know how else to describe them. They're just a hate group. It's like if you take them at their word, you know, the way you could take any hate group at their word, you know, and they'd be like, oh, you know, we're not a hate group. We just care about white people's rights and the white children, blah, blah. And then you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, let me come to a meeting. And then by like that meeting, you're like, man, they sure do seem to hate black people at this meeting.
We're not a hate group. We just think that all straight white men are trash until proven otherwise.
Exactly. And if you want to be there and you're of that group, you better first, like confess to your original sin. For being, and be guilty the whole time and be constantly, you know, kind of like repenting. Right. And then you can be there.
But even with them, there's a giant spectrum, right? There's a lot of women that are just, what they don't want is some fucking creepy boss to talk, you know, crazy, creepy sexual shit to them, and they have to absorb it because they want to move up the corporate ladder, and they're discriminated sexually in the office space. They're discriminated when it comes to, promotions and raises and, you know, the position in the company. That's,
sure.
That's fucking gross. I would hate
that.
to be a woman working in an office filled with fucking men who think about trying to have sex with you all the time.
Absolutely.
Probably sucks.
Absolutely. And there are certain struggles that like guys are unaware of, or maybe not unaware completely because you're bringing it up right now, but we don't experience certainly.
Right.
Like you don't know what it's like to walk around life as like a tiny hot chick that men just constantly want to fuck. I mean, I'm sure that comes.
And feel vulnerable.
Yes, and I'm
physically.
sure like being catcalled. You know, when they first came out with that video, the one that went viral of the chick being catcalled around New York City, my first reaction was I thought it was very interesting, and I said because you go if you're a guy who doesn't catcall chicks, which is like the category I fall into. That's just not my style of getting laid. I've never thought of just being like, let me get that ass, ma, like as you walk by me. But I mean, you know, that did roll off the tongue kind of naturally. So maybe I should try it.
You should try that. It sounded good.
Maybe that'll work.
It made me get nervous.
But like, so it's interesting to see that because you're like, oh, I don't do that. So as a guy who doesn't do that, I'm the only category of people who's like unaware of it. Kind of because like women are aware.
Do you know how they made that video?
I found out later.
Yeah.
I did find out later.
Please tell everybody.
So
it's
they
hilarious.
took like hours and hours of footage. They basically went all day long and disproportionately took footage of black neighborhoods.
They went around in circles in this black neighborhood.
In Harlem and in Times Square, in these two areas, and they basically got a lot of black guys, talking, to a
very attractive
white
girl
chick
with a big butt.
Yes, the crime of the century.
Yeah,
but at least it's like, look, I do think there's something to be said for. Like, oh, okay, look, I don't know what the experience of getting catcalled is.
Right.
This might be pissing off some women, so okay, like let's look at that. But then there's also like lots of struggles of men that women don't necessarily know about. And the problem with feminists is that, and modern feminists, is that they're not going like, hey, we both have struggles here, let's have a conversation. We're not like we're humanists, we're equalists. Let's have a conversation. They're like, we're feminists.
Right.
We're on this team, and we're going to talk about our struggles and lecture you about it. And you can never discuss the opposite. Like the truth and the past gets so perverted. Like they'd speak like the past was all just oppressive gender roles toward women. It's like, actually, in reality, there were oppressive gender roles for everybody in the past. And it's very debatable who they were more oppressive for. Like, in my grandmother's and grandfather's day, oppressive gender roles landed my grandfather in combat fighting and war. Like, it wasn't that, you know, it wasn't like, oh, the men didn't have any struggles that the women didn't know about. Like, again, we technologically advanced. We don't need those gender roles, which we did need for lots of years before technology. There's no way for humans to survive. I mean, go 400 years ago and say, let's abolish gender roles. It's like, what? Like, you're going to have kids until, 3 of them die from polio.
Still, I mean, that's what was the point of the Google memo. There's still things that people gravitate towards that are male with more frequency than they do with are female. And then you have these aberrations, these women that want to be MMA fighters and these men that want to be florists. And you have all the different people in between. And to try to get equality. And that was like one of the things that was so frustrating about people is that we're not saying that women shouldn't be equal. They can't be equal. We're saying they're not equal.
Yeah.
They're not equally represented in this particular field, this particular discipline. Now let's explore why.
Sure.
And one of the things that I thought was so crazy about the Google memo was that the guy had like a page and a half of like dedicated to what would be a way to get women more interested in tech, and he had all these citations for all these different studies that he was quoting. And when they reprinted it in several sources, they removed the citations, and they would put like they'd take these quotes out of context and highlight them and make them larger, and it's like,
which
whoa.
I find strange to be like, I read part of that thing and it seemed fairly reasonable to me, and I saw it very misrepresented in the way people were talking about it on the news. And like, it's just this weird thing where you're like, okay, look, if you do like equality is. What exactly do we even mean by that? It's like, yeah, the equality under the law or something like that. Like,
right.
Okay, sure. But like, no, like men and women are different.
Well, men are different. Like you and I are different.
Yes.
Like you know way more about politics than I do.
And you know way more about hunting elk and shit like that.
Well, that's always going to be the case. It's not an equal thing because we're not mathematical
I've got
problems.
a huge gap to close on your elk hunting knowledge. I got to get at it. I got to get at it now.
That's a weird one that I probably shouldn't have dipped my toes into. It's just so absorbed.
No, but you're absolutely
but that's
right.
Just
and
the case with all humans.
It is like snowflakes. I mean, we're all completely different and have different. And the idea that equality, I mean, you'll never have that of any true sense. Right. And then the thing with like, okay, with women, it seems like feminists basically like they almost, while bashing men and bashing the traditional kind of masculine gender role, they also seem to embrace it and want that for women. So like if men
are... what they really want it for? Transgender people. That's where it gets super slippery because the left wants really classic feminine like transgender people.
Yes.
Like when Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner, he's painting his toes and wearing high heels and short skirts and gets a tit job, gets his jaw sawed down. Like you can't just be a woman. You can't just be a manly looking woman. You got to be a woman with a fucking facial surgery.
You got to be beautiful.
Yeah, and we go, yes, you're amazing. You go.
That's right.
But if a girl embraces those classic gender roles, like wearing high heels and short skirts, and her tits are pushed together, and like, oh God, you're falling into this classic gender trap.
Well, that's right. Or if a woman said like, oh, I want to be a housewife and like raise my kids and live a traditional lifestyle,
right.
Like that's, or if I'm going to move for my husband or something like that,
right.
Like that's
but if you're a gay married man and you say that,
go for it.
You go, girl.
And you see the same thing happen where they literally the same thing they'll hate if a man does. So if you had read a feminist article about MMA 7 years ago, it would have been all about like toxic masculinity and male aggression and all this stuff. But as soon as Ronda Rousey was doing it, it's like, that's our girl. Let's go do it. If dirty comedy, offensive comedy, they're like, no, fuck that. That's your male. But as soon as Amy Schumer's doing it, it's like, let's go. Like they love for a woman to do all the things that they always said they hate.
Right.
And the crazy thing is like, they'll say these things where it's like, like women, whatever it is, like women are, whatever percentage, like 51% of the population, and they're only like 10% of Congress or something. I'm just making these numbers up, but it's something like in that ballpark. And they'll be like, well, this is a problem. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I'm all for freedom. So if there's any barrier in someone's way, get that out of there.
Right.
But if people are free and like men choose to go be politicians and women more choose to go into like, like nursing and like these other like kind of like maternalistic fields that women go into a lot. And you're like, okay, so like, are you sure the answer is just that they should be more like men? Like maybe this is like saying something better about women. Like men are like going into ruling over other people, and women are going into like a nurturing field. Like maybe the fact that women prioritize family over money is not a bad thing that needs to be reorganized.
Well,
maybe that's a great thing.
There's going to be some women that choose to pursue a career at the very highest levels of capitalism, and there's going to be some that have zero interest in doing that. And that's the same with men as well. It's just we can't deny the patterns that we see. What we should figure out is like, are there barriers? If there's barriers, unjust barriers to keep women from things, and I'm sure there are, those things we should concentrate on.
Yes.
But concentrating on leveling the number of people in Congress, and that's essentially sexual affirmative action.
Yeah.
You want to get more women in those positions because you think that, well, how many women do you have running? That's when you get to Hillary Clinton. I mean, like, we want a woman to be president. Okay,
right.
How about a lying old lady who faints a lot? Is that one okay? You'd go like, no, well, that's ridiculous. Well, that's what you got.
Yeah.
When you wanted to get only women, you got that one, okay? So what the fuck do you want to do now? Because what you're doing is you can't just decide that you only want, you want 50% men, 50% women and all. What about coal mining? You want to have 50% of women die in fucking coal mining accidents? You know the disproportionate number of men who die on the job? It's staggering.
But that's my point with the feminist thing, where it's kind of, this is why it's not, they'll be like, well, we're just for equality. It's like, okay, well, if you're just for equality, how come I never hear about how the workplace death rate is like disproportionately men? I don't mean disproportionately a little bit. It's like over 90% men. How about prison sentencing differences? They're like, these are major, major things where people die or get thrown in a cage. But that doesn't come up at all because it's like,
if it's black men, they look.
Well, that's right. Then okay, but then of course it's also got to be like the black struggle,
white racism, white male racism,
and that's linked with the woman's struggle, like the black struggle. Like they've kind of piggybacked onto that, which I really can't stand.
They should piggyback onto LGBTQW. Women too.
That's what. Well, they kind of are. I mean, I hear that all the time. I heard one person on MSNBC, and they were like, "We just care about the rights of women and minorities and LGBT people and immigrants and like something else." And I was like, "Just say not white men. Like, can I just save you some time? Say not straight cis white men. That's who we don't. Everyone else, you're naming them all in groups. So just say it. Like, just cut to the chase, just for time."
And they're doing it to align themselves. They're doing it to align themselves with other people that are going to have their back and agree with them, and they go to war with it that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it becomes this
troops
thing
behind them,
like what you said before, where you go, if there's any barriers, let's remove them. But then you get to a certain point where you're just like, if we're being honest, there are no real barriers. There are no real barriers to an individual. Okay, and if there are, let's go after them. But just on the big picture, like talking about things, if you're like a woman who really wants to do something in 2017 in a first world country like the United States of America, I don't see, I mean, there are laws against paying a woman less than a man at the same job. There are all these rules. There are lots of people who will like actually bend over backward because they're really looking to have like diversity. Like corporations really love diversity.
Right.
Everyone in show business knows that's true.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I don't see a real barrier, but then when they can't find one, they'll kind of create this barrier that you can't see. So if we give people a bunch of freedom and then women make certain choices and men make certain choices, and this leads to, on average, men making 23% more than women, then they go, well, and I go, well, there's no barrier. It's just women making choices. They go, well, there's this barrier called patriarchy that's there somehow, and we've got to like, it's because these women have been socialized into thinking that they're, so then they'll find this thing that you can't prove or disprove, you can't test. It's just kind of like, but we live in a rape culture.
Right. It's like fighting terrorism, the war on terror.
It's the same shit. It's like, well, if it's just an idea, I guess we're always fighting that idea.
Yeah. And until women assume the power position, and there's a disproportionate number of women in Congress, and disproportionate number of women who are police officers, and women who are judges, and women who are lawyers, and women who are in all positions of power. If men feel the heavy boot of the oppressive woman, until then, shut the fuck up.
And it's all so ridiculous. It's just all so silly. It's like, what area of life is there where things are proportionally representative?
Well, black people in basketball.
No, I'm proportionately. I'm saying proportionately. So they don't make up 13% of basketball. Yeah, like they make up. I mean, it's like where do you find
that's racist? Yeah. We need to even that out.
Yes, absolutely.
Get more white people in
more
there. More
Asians and white people in the NBA.
Slow that game down a little bit. Make it easier to follow. Yeah, more black people in hockey. That's a mess.
But it's all so fucking like.
We should celebrate the differences we have, and just don't be a cunt. Don't be racist.
That's it.
That's it. Don't be sexist. Don't be racist. But you don't get brownie points just because you're a chick. You don't.
No, and you shouldn't. And you shouldn't get into this thing where it's like. And I know it's like, I've heard like people, particularly like left-wing leaning feminists, or like so female comics who are feminists, who I know several of.
How dare you?
And I've yes, I know.
You calling people out?
Calling
them out without calling them out?
Not by name, but
okay.
But I've heard, and they'll get very. And one of them said to me once, they go, Dave, your whole thing is just that you hate women.
Oh, that's
and you're
adorable.
Like, but it's like, hate women. Like, what do you?
I saw a woman say that to Brian Posehn, and you know what he said? It was hilarious. He goes, you know what? I've heard that before, and every woman that said that I hated.
That really is a great response.
Because it was a stupid argument.
It is.
She was just like saying, like, in a blanket statement, you hate women. No, you.
But I just go, I challenge a lot of people on the left who talk about race or sexism and these things. I just challenge you to just entertain the possibility for like 1 second. Entertain the possibility that you're not right about all of this stuff, and that the correct position is to treat everybody equal. Now, I know that sounds really, really wild and out there, and I'm not taking into account my white privilege and the history, but just entertain for 1 second the possibility that the correct answer is to treat everybody equal and not judge them based on their race. And then if you entertain that for 1 second, you'll start realizing like, oh, holy shit, if that's true, I'm really the one being the bigot here. I've seen this, so like if you know the roast battle shows they have down at the Comedy Store here, those have, and they started doing them in New York too now, they're really popular. There are like these group of female comics that will come out, and I don't even begrudge them for this, but they'll come out and just hardcore like root for the female comic.
Okay.
Like they'll post about like, just want to see more women succeed at roast battle, coming out tonight to cheer on my girl, blah, blah. And there'll be this dynamic where like their first 2 jokes, you know, they'll just get this like, it's just like, you know, female voices from the corner where the comics hang, like super, super loud for the chick comic. And like, whatever, I don't begrudge them anything. Like, fine, come do that. But it's just like those same people who will be like, you're like against women. Like, I would never in a million years go out to a show and be like, I'm just rooting for the men today. Like I don't think this way. I'm not like on team man, but you are on team women. Like it's just it just seems to me that there's a lot of that going on. You know what I mean? A lot of that shit where it's like you kind of project this thing that you see racism everywhere or you see sexism everywhere, but all I really see is you fucking lecturing people based on race and sex.
Well, in their mind, they're allowed to do it the same way Cain Velasquez is allowed to have brown pride in his chest.
Yeah,
kind of the same thing. Like you're disenfranchised or you're marginalized, so you're allowed to stay. Even if you're not, you're playing that victim card as a woman, and you're allowed to say, "I'm here to support my girl." Like I was talking about this on stage the other day. I saw a bumper sticker on a car. It said "Girls kick ass," and I was like, "Some of them."
Yeah.
Some of them are lazy slobs. Like, what are you going to align yourself with 150 million women just in this country alone? That's ridiculous. And I was saying if a guy had a bumper sticker that said "Boys kick ass," he'd be like, follow that guy and find out where he's been fucking these kids. Because first of all, you'd never say boys. Boys kick ass. You put that on your bumper sticker. Who the fuck are you? You'd pull him over. Let me see your license. Where do you live, man? What do you do for a living? What's that bumper sticker about? What the fuck do you mean by that?
Yes. And I don't need, like, I almost feel like an asshole sometimes where I preface everything with a disclaimer, like, and I'm not saying this, and I'm not, but I just want it to be clear that, like, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions to the rule, but it's also kind of strange to me that, like, if you want to celebrate women, why are you celebrating such a masculine quality? Like, it's kind of like, it's like, look, there are white players who are great basketball players, right? There are Dirk Nowitzki was an amazing basketball player. Right. But if I just wrote somewhere like, white people kick ass at basketball, it's like, well, actually,
this is a movie
they
coming
don't
out.
in general. Women don't kick ass in general. Generally speaking, that's a male thing to do.
Right.
So, like, I'm not saying there's not exceptions to that, but you're writing white people kick ass at basketball. It's kind of misleading.
Right. Well, there's that thing that's coming out, that movie with Steve Carell, where he plays that man who had the tennis match against Billie Jean King, and he was like barely ranked. He was a terrible tennis player, and he fucked Billie Jean King up, and he was like sort of mocking her the whole way, and it was like a real hallmark moment.
I don't know about that. Oh, really? So he just played a female
he was like
tennis player?
a professional tennis player, but he wasn't the best. And Billie Jean King was the best woman in the world. Mm-hmm. And they played, and the Steve Carell character beat her. Wasn't that what happened? I believe that's what happened. I'm getting them conflated with Renee Richards, the guy who used to be a man and then became a transgender woman and started stomping everybody in tennis. He was like terrible as a man, and then he became a woman who was one of the best in the world. And like, but there's no biological difference. Even without a penis, you're still stomping them.
It again is like so funny because once it's so funny like how much this stuff starts undermining their own arguments.
Billie Jean King won?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't want to get that wrong.
So I got wrong the Renee Richard one. Yeah, that's what I confused. So what was and he was like particularly gross, right? And Steve Carell plays him really well in the movie. Same Steve Carell who played that crazy guy in that wrestling movie.
He did a really great job with that. What a creepy story.
What a crazy story.
You ever see the ESPN 30 for 30 on that?
Yes, I did.
So good, man.
Yeah.
I mean, not good in the sense that the story's
so
not
well
good,
done.
but such a compelling, unbelievable story. Oh my God.
Yeah. So when Steve Carell played that character, and then you watch the video of the actual character, they're like, whoa, like he just nailed that guy.
Yeah, Steve Carell's an incredible talent, man.
He's such a good fucking actor.
To be that funny of a comedian and that good of a dramatic actor is fucking pretty incredible. I guess his comedy, though, is always kind of his acting, is like that's his strength in comedy. Like he'd own that character,
right.
kind of,
Well, Roger Federer said that recently, and he got in trouble, right? That the best women.
No, it was
Roger Federer.
It was what's his name, the older guy.
Right.
Fuck. What's the
John
old
McEnroe.
McEnroe. Yeah,
McEnroe said that
And they
the
let
best.
him. They let him into it. He said he started by saying Serena was the best female player.
Right.
And then they go, why female?
Oh, well.
And he was like, well, what do you mean? Because I think she's the best female player. He goes, well, why female? Why not say male? He goes, because the men are way better. Like he was literally just answering the question. Like
I know.
I started off giving this woman an extraordinary compliment.
That was the story I remember. Didn't Serena play against an unranked male player?
She
Yeah.
did. They used to play when they were younger, I think. And,
She played against some guy. That was
Yeah.
the story, and the guy kicked her ass,
Yeah.
and everybody was like, "What?"
It just
Yeah.
seems to me to be this thing where I kind of look at, obviously, like we're talking at generalizations here, and there are exceptions. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like there are, like, you know, Ronda Rousey could beat the shit out of me. Well,
you're not a
I still
fighter,
use
though.
her as an example.
But it's a bad
No,
example
but I'm
'cause
just
you're
saying,
not a fighter.
No, but I'm just making the point that, like, if you have this stereotype that men are stronger than women or something like that, there are exceptions to
Right.
the rule. If you get, and there are, and I still use Ronda Rousey even though she's not champ anymore. She's just
Right.
still got that ring to it. But I'm saying there are exceptions to the rule. There are exceptions, and to treat someone based on a group dynamic is ignorant. Like but if you're going to, like, I do think there are differences between men and women, generally speaking, and if you believe that, it's like if we're going to celebrate women, I just think it's kind of odd that we have to celebrate the most masculine achievements of women. It's like celebrating them kicking ass. There are these things that I feel like women are superior to men in, that I'm very impressed by them. Like, I just think
But wait
women...
a minute, hold on, let me stop you. Because you think that running a corporation is masculine? Like, do you think that being involved in any creative endeavor is masculine?
No.
Do you think that being involved in anything in tech is masculine?
No.
But that's what they're talking about,
Well,
right?
I was more responding to the women kick ass.
But that's just a stupid bumper sticker.
No, you're right,
But
it is.
It's really
But-
just groupthink is
but I
what
think
my
so-
issue with it was.
If you see things like but the element I'm responding to is that kick ass to me just
Right.
seems to be kind of like a masculine thing. I'm describing that as masculine.
Yeah, it was just one silly, stupid bumper sticker.
Sure,
but girls
but I'm-
like to say those things, right?
Yes, but I just think there's something about it. It seems to me like the nurturing element of femininity is almost like denigrated, and the ass kicky element is praised. Where it's
Right.
like, if I'm talking kicking ass and nurture, and I'm talking men versus women in general, just broad speaking,
Right.
like I tend to think of one being male and one being female.
Right. To wrap this all up and bring it all down, I think we'd all be better off, male, women, white, black, Asian, whatever, if we're just reasonable, nice people, you know? And that's the real problem, is that we lock off, as we've been discussing all day, into these camps.
Yeah.
And we are on camp white male, and we are on camp black male, or camp gay, or camp transgender, or camp woman. And we just lock into these ideologies, and we hate anybody else different. And we have these divisive things that we say, like all white men are trash unless proven otherwise. You know, like that kind of crazy shit. Like you're setting it up so the guy's like, sorry. Like you come in sorry. So it's not me. I didn't do it. Instead of just being a reasonable, normal person. But there's not enough reasonable, normal people. So women are constantly dealing with assholes. So they develop these kind of patterns of behavior. They think about men as being these intrusive, shitty people who just want to get in your pants and really don't care about you, and they're manipulative and they just want to fuck you.
Which is,
Right.
when you say it, I mean, that is somewhat true. That does
Somewhat
kind
true.
of describe us.
And then men think of women as being manipulative too, always looking for the bigger, better deal. You know, well, they're going to fuck their personal trainer while you're at work, and
No,
we think
you're
about
right.
getting divorced and losing all your money because you were too stupid. You didn't sign a prenuptial agreement. She hires some kick-ass attorney, and then you're fucked. We all know guys who have experienced that before too. She lies about you beating the kids, and then she
Right.
gets full custody.
Like, that's all real, but then
Right.
the good stuff is all real too.
all
You know what I
real.
mean? It's like,
Across
that's
the
all
board.
real and that does happen, but then there's also like the chick who just like gives a guy like, you know, like the security and confidence
Yeah.
he never had to go be great. There's the guy who
Sure.
like does support his chick through like her endeavors, and like, you know, it's like,
Sure.
so it's like you got it, you know, it's like that shit in the hurricane in Houston kind of put some perspective on that for me, where it's like, you know, it's like you see just like all these people, it's like Antifa versus Nazis is the state of the country, and then you see like this horrible hurricane happen, and just the acts of kindness afterward. You see
Right.
these people like young guys, like these group of like 20-year-olds maybe they were, I saw, who took their motorboats down to Houston and are pulling old people out of
Yeah.
like their homes, and you're like, God damn it, motherfucker, like that's our country too.
Yep.
You know, and like it's all real. Like the Nazis are our country too, but that
That's
guy's our country
what
too.
that is also also is people responding to a very real problem where it really unites people. They feel like they have to help each other.
Because it's a real problem, you know.
Most of the time, we're separated from each other by buildings and cars, and there's this weird alienation we have with one another. It's one of the reasons why places of high density, you get much more liberal ideologies, or liberal in terms of like accepting, I should say, not necessarily conservative, but there's a lot of that too, democratic versus conservative or left-wing versus conservative. But these big population cultures, people interact with each other more. You know, you don't get the same kind of racism. You know, you get less, and it's less accepted, I think, in like maybe say New York City than probably anywhere. Because in New York City, especially in Manhattan, everybody's got to interact. Not saying you don't encounter it. You certainly do on both sides. White racism, black racism, you're going to encounter racism. It's a flaw in human nature. The same thing that we're talking about with the assholes with the tiki torches. Yeah. It's a flaw.
Everyone likes to feel like they're the best, and my team is the best, and my local bar is the best, and my aunt makes the best chili.
This
and
town
my aunt,
kicks that town's ass.
And it's like, no, your aunt does not make the world's best chili. That's fucking ridiculous. It's you know, the odds are very against it. Let's just say it's a very, very low chance.
You got to prove it.
But people want to feel that way.
Right.
And so there will always be these certain kind of in-group preference things where there's, but like you said, there are, I do think like growing up in New York City, you also just see, and this is the beautiful thing that we fucking lost in America that sucks, but it's like freedom does fucking bring people together. And capitalism, even though it's become a dirty word, like all that shit brings people together, man. Like I'm a Jew and I can go on a New York City street and put my hand out and like a Muslim guy comes and picks me up and drops me off at home. And
you
he's
just
like,
use Uber, dude. You're wasting your time with all that.
I mean, to be honest, I really do use Uber, but it's
do you
less
use
Muslims.
Lyft or Uber?
I was doing Lyft, and now I just switched over to Uber.
Do you feel bad that Uber was getting locked out of London? Like, I'm gonna step up and help out Uber.
I don't know about that. I knew they're locked out of Austin, I think.
Austin?
Like Austin, Texas. They left there.
I think they're locked out of London now. I think the mayor just said that the way they operate sucks. Fuck off.
Well,
I
I love anything that undermines government monopoly. So I thought it was great that they undermined that whole medallion thing. I think it's like, I think technology that undermines the government is the most beautiful thing ever. As you know, that Waze app, they have that now in New York City. They'll tell you if there's a camera on the next red light. They'll tell you if there's a cop on the highway waiting to check. You know, like they'll be like police ahead.
Right.
So there's literally this system where the cops will sit there and wait for someone to come, you know, speeding, so they can come, you know, extort you for some money.
Do you understand how that works? The Waze thing, that it's just people calling in. So cops call in fake cars.
I did not know that, but I knew that it was other people calling in.
People are very upset because the police officers actually call in fake cop on the side of the road calls.
But so what is that doing? Making people drive the speed limit?
Fucks it up. It's crying wolf.
So you basically just don't believe it as much anymore? It's interesting.
Exactly.
But I thought there was something really beautiful about that.
But is that to serve or protect? I get so confused.
No, I mean that's
like when they do something
that's
like
their third thing. It's serve, protect, and rule.
And fake you out.
Yeah.
They're juking you.
But I thought when they first did it, what a beautiful thing that you're going like, because look, if you tell them there's a cop ahead, what you're going to do is make sure you're not speeding. I mean, that's the only trick. So essentially, it's doing what you would claim the law wants you to do. It's just doing it in a way where the state doesn't fucking extort you.
Yeah.
You know, of course, so then they'll start going, oh, we better fuck with that. Better not let that work.
Yeah, they'll eventually figure out a way around that. Or we're going to get to a point, I think, in our lifetimes where it's impossible to lie. I think that's where it's headed. And I think that's going to solve a lot of our issues socially, a lot of our issues politically. We're going to understand motivations behind things in a way. Like maybe motivations will seem color coded.
That is,
like when someone's envious, you'll literally see green with some new program we're all running. You know.
But I think what you're saying, like we've already started to see it, and it's like it's much, much harder. I think that it's much, much harder for people to pull off lying. It was much harder for Hillary Clinton to pull off than for traditional politics in the past because they're leaking everything online now.
Yeah.
And it's just harder for the government or the big corporations or the media to convince you of this narrative. It's getting harder and harder. Like we haven't figured out exactly how to move it in a good direction, but like it is, you see the control that they have being undermined. The control of the mainstream media is being undermined. The control of universities.
Well, it's already gone. The internet has sort of eroded all the control of mainstream media.
Yeah.
CNN is now called fake news 1 million times a day all throughout the country.
And you look at these people
are constantly calling.
That's right.
The president calls it fake. That's fucking CNN.
Oh, that's right. And then you say like when you said it earlier in the show about Fox News had a monopoly on right-wing news. Well, that's fucking over.
Right.
I mean, look at when Ben Shapiro comes on your shows. Look at the numbers that thing does. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, Fox News has a big competitor on their hands now, and all these other guys at Crowder and all these guys are like huge. And all of if you look at like
and Jordan, who's more, like he calls himself a classic British liberal. He looks at it that way, which is like a sort of a different definition. I mean, it's more of a pragmatic, sort of more conservative
More
type
pragmatic, probably closest to what is called libertarian in American school of thought. Like that's the classical liberal position.
But people disingenuously call him alt-right.
It's just so freaking ridiculous. But this is the thing where it's like everyone to the right of Bernie Sanders is a Nazi. It's like there's just these words don't even mean anything anymore.
They're just insults,
so
and
it's
then
like,
people shove them in your face, and it's like lying Hillary, like that kind of thing.
Right. But you take the most fucked up word you can think of to justify the legal position, and then culturally you say, oh, by the way, that word applies to everything. Yeah. So, it's like women are getting raped on college campus, so we get the law passed.
Well, that's one of the real problems with a guy like Donald Trump, is that when he boils things down to these slogans, then they boil things down to slogans in return, and we just have a fucking fight where you're throwing rocks at each other.
That was one of the amazing things about Trump and the moment, is that Trump comes out, he's like this simplistic buffoon, and in the normal mind, you're like, well, at some point he's going to meet a professional who will embarrass him. And then you start to realize after a while, it's like, oh, there's just no professional.
Well,
it's like he had no plans, neither did Hillary Clinton. They were all completely empty.
The difference between him versus Hillary versus what we just had with Mitt Romney versus Obama. Two really reasonable, well-spoken people who are accomplished and quite intelligent, although one of them believes in nonsense. I don't know which one. They both believe in nonsense, right?
They both believe in a lot of nonsense.
But one of them believes in, like,
one of
Joseph
them
Smith
is wearing
nonsense.
magical underwear at a presidential debate.
To wear them. Yeah, he has to, or it goes straight to like a cabin in hell. You have to stay there with no satellite TV. I don't know what the rule is, but
you only get 2 of your wives to join you.
I just hope that we sling back. I hope we have this blow back this way, and I don't know who's going to emerge between now and 2020. But it's going to have to be someone that's interesting, right?
Well,
it's going to have to be someone that we look at and go, okay, this is a viable alternative to what we're currently dealing with. And they probably shouldn't say shit for a long time. They should probably just like build up and prepare and just constantly say, I'm not running. I'm not running.
I don't know, man. I don't know if there's any bringing this thing back together. The United States of America.
Really?
I think we might be going our separate ways in the future. I just think we might be headed toward some type of like Soviet style breakup.
What?
Like where some of the countries still exist, but we're not all a part of the same thing. I look at these 2 trends that I see happening, right? And one is and this to me is the biggest moral issue of our time, but the continued growth of the state, which is just like we live under
which always happens, just like a corporation, universal growth. They want to get bigger and stronger every year.
Yeah, pretty much always seems to happen. I mean, and a government, unlike corporations, always want to grow. A lot of them go out of business, but they always want to get bigger. Governments, they can force you to pay them, so it's a lot easier for them to grow. And this is most of advanced societies start as a constitution with a somewhat limited government, and then it grows and grows and grows.
That was the big appeal of Trump. The only appeal, drain the swamp.
This is right.
That was the big one.
And a lot of it was, some of it was good. The idea of draining the swamp is good, and not fighting these wars anymore, I think, is really great. But you have this thing where we live under the biggest government, most powerful government in the history of the world. I mean, there's never been a government that spends $4 trillion that can drone bomb anyone on the planet. That's we have bases all over the world. Hundreds of different countries, or at least well over 100, and everything is going up. I mean, every budget, Bush spent the most ever, then Obama spent the most ever. Trump will outspend Obama, no question about it. And all of the major problems that I see are direct result of this, like the longest wars in American history, the mass incarceration rate, spying on all of our citizens, record debt, like all of these things are a result of government being way too big and way too out of control. And then at the same time, while we're like spending ourselves too far into debt, way too extended militarily, the culture is also completely decaying. And we're more at war with each other than we've ever been. And like I said before, we go from a Buckley-Vidal debate to Trump-Clinton. Like we've had a Jerry Springer culture, and now we got a Jerry Springer president to go with it. And I just see this culture breaking up, the government getting too big. I don't know how this all works out so that we're all friends again. But I'd love for someone to maybe that's the answer.
Only way. Spoken like a true white man. Great privilege. Dave, we got to wrap this up. Thank you very much, man. It's always, an awesome time.
Can I plug my? I just put a new comedy special out, so I just wanted to mention that. Just put out my debut comedy special. It's called Libertas, and you can get it at gasdigitalnetwork.com. The album is #1 on iTunes.
Woo!
So just
and
wanted
your
to plug
podcast,
that.
plug that. iTunes.
Part of the Problem, Legion of Skanks, also both available on iTunes. All my stuff's at gasdigitalnetwork.com.
Dude, we got to do this more often.
I can't wait to do it again, brother. Absolutely.
Dave Smith, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you fucks tomorrow.
Oh, thanks, brother.